Minecraft is a voxel-based survival sandbox game where they focus on crafting, mining, combat, and building. With its infinite world, vast scope, and endless possibilities, Minecraft has gone on to become the best-selling game of all time, with over 230 million units sold across all platforms. But its beginnings were much more humble. In 2009, Zach Barth spent a few months creating Infiniminer, a mining and construction game that would go on to directly inspire Notch, the creator of Minecraft. Now unfortunately Notch has gone on to be what we here in Australia like to call a shit cunt. But he's important to the story, so I do still have to mention him. With some inspiration and direction, development would continue until a paid alpha was released in June of 2009, serving as a part of the inspiration for modern early access development. In late 2011, the game officially left beta, with Notch stepping down as the lead and moving on to other projects. As the game grew in complexity and content, so did its success, with ports for pretty much anything with a screen cropping up in the following years. On the 5th of November 2014, Mojang, the studio behind Minecraft, was sold to Microsoft for $2.5 billion. Over 8 years after the deal, Minecraft continues to release highly anticipated content updates, shifting to a pseudo-live service model, with 1.20 set to release sometime in the first half of 2023. Now we probably all already knew this, but I heard that Mark from Saskatchewan isn't too up on Minecraft, so that introduction was for you, Mark. I personally became aware of the game in 2010 or 2011 when a friend showed it to me on his PC. I of course didn't appreciate it at the time because you couldn't blow someone's brains out or chainsaw them in half, which was more my speed as a 12-year-old who desperately wanted to feel grown up. But a couple years later I picked up the Pocket Edition on my iPod Touch and loved it, following up with the more fleshed out Xbox 360 version and finally the PC version. I can't imagine how many hours I spent playing this game, but needless to say, it was a lot. Around 2015 or 16 it started to fall by the wayside for me. I had never had a consistent save on the PC version and so found myself having to start over to see the new content, and the time investment wasn't worth it anymore. So with the game's size and scope, my personal memories, and all the content I'm completely ignorant of, how do I plan to analyse Minecraft? Well, simply put, I'm gonna pick and choose. Besides, if I was to try and cover everything, this video would take way longer than it already has, and would become out of date real quickly. And hey, Minecraft is largely about player agency, so I'm going to use that agency to cover what I feel is most important. As you can see, that's still a lot, but it's not quite everything. So let's get to analysing Minecraft. For this video, I'm playing the Java version on version 1.19.2. The Java version is the original incarnation, though the other versions and ports have since been consolidated under the Bedrock version. There are some slight differences between Bedrock and Java, but I believe they're pretty superficial. As far as I'm aware, the content is for all intents and purposes the same. So I'm playing the Java edition because that's what I'm used to. When creating a new world, there are plenty of options related to difficulty, how the world generates, and game rules, but I just went for the standard survival or normal difficulty as I imagine this is the most common experience. So you create the world, it's generated, and you're dropped in it. You're not told anything. No objectives, no controls, no direction at all. Your surroundings are completely randomly generated, a luck of the draw in terms of resources. And that sets up perfectly what Minecraft is about. The player expressing themselves and making decisions in an attempt to make what they can out of what's around them. Despite the possibilities, for this first day, what you really need is some tools and a bed. Once night falls, monsters will emerge, and with few resources it can be quite an ordeal. So having a bed that you can sleep in to skip to morning is a must. And tools help get you equipped for encounters and generally speed the process up. But how do you do any of this when the game doesn't tell you anything? Luckily, Minecraft's simplicity creates a consistent thread to get you started. You can punch things by left clicking and chip away at things by holding left click. In an attempt to get your bearings, you'll no doubt try this out. You may get some dirt or sand, and so you begin experimenting on other blocks. When you mine a tree and get a log, a pop-up will tell you that you have new recipes you can create. By tapping around the keyboard a little more, you'll find that E opens the inventory and that the green book holds recipes. Your wood becomes wooden planks, which can become a crafting table. Then, using the crafting table, which allows for more complex crafting thanks to its larger grid, you can make a wooden pickaxe. That pickaxe allows you to mine and actually collect stone, which can then be used to craft stone tools. Very efficiently and silently, Minecraft leads you down a path that demonstrates its core systems, all while preparing you for what's ahead. With these tools you can look around for sheep, which drop wool when killed. With 3 wool and 3 wood, you can craft a bed and skip night. This first day I'm mentioning may not be the first day at all. For an inexperienced player, it may take 3 in-game days and a few deaths to get your bearings and properly discern the systems and mechanics at play. Or for someone who's done it tons of times, it could take 2 minutes. But the point is that while Minecraft can often appear oblique and tight-lipped, there are crumbs at the very beginning that get the player started, while respecting their agency and ability to have complete responsibility for their actions and path. I believe that this hands-off approach communicates respect. If one player mines wood within 15 seconds of spawning and another within 15 minutes, they both get the same pop-up, the same nudge. Thanks to Minecraft's lack of imposition via tutorials or overbearing UI, both of these players will get the lovely sensation of making progress, the exciting flood of information and lessons that come with the start of your journey. With that lack of imposition comes a lack of judgment. This is crucial because it means that no matter how disparate the initial experience may be between players, they'll always learn something. Someone who finds themselves without a bed at night will become familiar with different mobs and how they engage with the player. Zombies are close range and often spawn in numbers, skeletons are long range, spiders are quick and creepers explode, etc. If a player then dies to these mobs, they learn that you lose everything on you upon death, with this first night being the best scenario to learn this lesson in, as you'll have the least amount of stuff to actually lose. As you can see, the game is very player driven, meaning that the decisions you make feel like they have weight and purpose, so you'll naturally be looking to learn, easily picking up on these details and lessons. These lessons are about core aspects of the game and so can be put into use right away, making for powerful moments of overcoming previous obstacles to impart a sense of true progression, with growth and improvement manifesting rapidly, creating a feedback loop that makes you want to learn even more. In this example, it could be dying to zombies on the first night and then retrieving your items and successfully defeating them with your sword, becoming curious about the best tactics for other monsters. And all of this happens passively, the game just sits as it is, allowing its world and ecosystem to tick away around you, culminating in that lack of judgment I just mentioned. This all translates into the player feeling in control of their own actions, truly free. There are some limitations, mind you, but they're logical ones. What the game does easily communicate is your status, by which I mean things like health, hunger, XP, armor level, etc. The game only gives visibility on the mechanics that matter most to your survival. The entire UI is nestled in the bottom center of the screen, with the most pressing information like health and hunger at the top, putting them in your peripheral vision at all times. These work pretty simply. Your hearts go down when you get hit, you die when you lose them all. Hunger goes down over time and can be refilled by eating, with the pace of its erosion increasing based on your actions, like sprinting or jumping. Then there's the XP bar, which isn't relevant right now, followed by your toolbar, which displays 9 items you can quickly switch to. These are the most crucial elements to managing and measuring survival and what your priority should be in the beginning of the game, and as they play into the realism of the environment, they feel natural, instead of like elements that restrict or police your play too much. Finally, this restrained approach to player induction carries over to presentation. The lack of music and the art style that at first feels plain help pull focus to your actions and surviving. The presentation isn't distracting, but rather easy to pass and digest, helping smooth the introduction out. This extends to sound effects. Getting a new recipe isn't accompanied by too much fanfare, loud sound effects or flashing lights. This is a lot to say about just a game's first impression, but Minecraft's first impression is really important. It asserts the game's strengths and possibilities, putting all its cards on the table by ironically doing so little, making it clear that it's about player expression, agency, and exploration. It has the confidence to let its emergent world play out in front of you without pulling punches, understanding that although it appears simple and basic, it's shrouded in really great design that will ensure each player gets their very own first impression. The randomness does open the door to an unfair experience that leaves the player shit out of luck, but I respect it more for allowing that, making the opening feel more authentic. If you've played Minecraft before, this first day can be easy to get out of the way and rush through, but there's lots at play from second one, and hopefully I've demonstrated that. For me, this first day was incredibly nostalgic and comforting. As you can see, I got right to work, eager to get stuck back into Minecraft, quickly taking care of the essentials: tools, a bed, and some food. Next, I went exploring, to get a sense of my surroundings and see where I wanted to set up my base. The act of exploring is not too involved from a movement perspective. As is standard, you move with WASD and look with your mouse, jumping with space and crouching with shift. When crouched, you can't walk off the edge of a block, handy for safely looking below or around you on precarious terrain. There are no explicit maneuvers any more advanced than, say, sprinting, so with that, getting around can seem rather mundane, and by all accounts it is, but that simplicity allows for a very distinct rhythm. Chaining evenly timed jumps with strategic and precise sprint jumps can be a lot of fun, as goofy as it sounds. In fact, traversal can oddly become a sort of puzzle, where you only have two moves at your disposal, jumping and sprinting, and so at times, have to sit back and figure out what your path should be. And this could be frustrating, but the fact that you jump barely above one block high makes deciphering that path quite simple. There's also the option of just building your way up if you like instead, but I find it less interesting. That path is never predictable either, thanks to the game's reliance on procedural generation for its environment. I haven't specifically focused on this yet, but Minecraft is procedurally generated, with the world being completely different and infinite every time. In the early days, this was a much bigger talking point, but it speaks to the game's influence that it's not that strange a thing nowadays. Contrary to how it can feel in other titles, this isn't a choice made out of laziness, but rather one made to enhance the credibility of the world. There are quirks here and there like floating blocks or contrasting biomes like desert and forest sitting just a few blocks apart, but by and large the world appears incredibly natural as a result of this procedural generation. Even after playing the game for almost 10 years, this playthrough still felt completely fresh, like this was legitimately a new world, my new world, ready for me to explore, and that's super exciting. From a gameplay standpoint, procedural generation can create a more authentic flow of information. For example, I learnt about armor not from a tutorial or scripted sequence, but by coming across a village in my travels that had some leather gear I could pinch. By extension, you could also learn how to equip it, and the fact that it feels barely any of the armor bar could help you discern that there are higher levels of armor, with the fog of war that clouds your knowledge of the game receding at a naturalistic pace that's ultimately determined by the player in cooperation with the world around them, really immersing you into the adventure and growth it consists of. Beyond this, there's also a good distribution of content across different biomes, so that there's something more dynamic to engage with every couple of minutes. A mountain/hill that I briefly explored seemed pretty standard, so I moved on. About 5 minutes later, from the top of another hill, I take a look around and spot a deconstructed nether portal, a cave opening, bees which can be used to get honey, and llamas right in front of me, which can be tamed and used to transport goods. It felt reminiscent of Breath of the Wild, weirdly enough, where the map is built to always have something in sight that you can do, except this was all randomly generated. Of course, the options aren't always going to be as rich as Breath of the Wild. The llamas and bees are more interesting than integral, especially early game, but at least it's here, always giving the player options, concealed in crevices or folds of the earth, ready to be found with some perspective. Beyond the immediate gameplay ramifications, this teaches the player to observe and take in their surroundings. In doing so, you'll see that the environment can often be quite pretty. At first, everything seems rather utilitarian, textured to be easy to digest and understand, but with time you begin to appreciate what reveals to be a rather diverse colour palette, with the pixelated textures proving to blend together nicely from a distance, giving environments defined characteristics. This works in combination with the procedural generation, resulting in some striking vistas with interesting interplays of materials intersecting amongst truly unique formations. Mirroring the beauty of real life, the natural world in Minecraft feels unrestrained and untouched in a way that's compelling and breathtaking. I'd find myself just sitting back and appreciating what's in front of me, excited to see how the land would surprise me next. The different biomes generally do a good job of capturing different moods thanks to the visuals, backed up by mechanical decisions, like deserts having very little resources or forests being dense and at times cumbersome to traverse, so often roofed in by leaves. There's a unique type of hostility that each one has in store for the player, enough to make exploration diverse and at times challenging or tense, but not so much as to frustrate. The quirks of terrain generation that I touched on combine with each biome's unique properties to create this subtly haunting, apocalyptic feel to the world. Towns, for example, may be strewn across the sharp incline of a mountain, or seemingly torn in half by a deep ravine, rarely appearing idyllic, but sort of tragic, as though the villagers are slowly recovering from some long-past environmental disaster. Pools of lava will idly tremble and bubble amongst trees, inevitably setting them ablaze and at times taking out swaths of greenery. These details are so consistently visible yet remain unpredictable in how they manifest, coming across less as a fault in terrain generation logic and more as a part of the world's character, taking hold of that apocalyptic tone I touched on with its dispassionate and relentless yet passive march forward. In fact, the game has seemed to lean into this as development continued, with many updates containing new generated structures like shipwrecks or overgrown temples, things that actively play into this tone. As such, exploration can become strangely emotional and poignant, enhanced even more so by the music. It too reveals itself randomly, all of a sudden easing in and out to punctuate the time in which it graces your ears, and by extension the actions you take during it. It's often slow and led by keys or warping synths, making its presence known while letting you interpret and mold it to fit into the current moment. It helps that it all sounds really good, the stripped back arrangements still managing to be catchy and always welcome while you play. Inversely, when it disappears or refuses to show itself, something different is captured. The lack of music highlights your loneliness and isolation within the infinite expanse of this world. The steady rhythm of your steps stick out and bring to the forefront just how small you are. It likely won't always be that way though. Eventually you'll tread the lands confidently, knowing exactly where you're going and what you'll do there, the familiar routes and paths causing you to realize just how far you've come. These moments of emotional resonance then help build your relationship with the land, the player growing closer and further attached to it, increasing investment while letting you feel comfortable to explore not just the world but the possibilities of it. But that comes with settling down, and I wasn't quite there yet. I found that when I'm looking for a base, I don't take too many practical considerations into account. I instead wait for this eureka moment, an instant when I'll lay eyes on an area and immediately know that that's where I want to build. In a game that can be so driven by logic, I found myself giving into feeling and aesthetic. This was where I was going to spend most of my time, so I wanted it to be nice. Whether a mine was close didn't even occur at the time. This is where I first pinged an idea that regularly came back up as I played. Through its lack of suggestion and commitment to player freedom, Minecraft forces the player to make meaningful decisions completely on their own, like where will you build your home. These decisions, typically made under little influence, can end up reflecting the player themselves as a person. It facilitates not just active player expression through aesthetic choices like how your impact on the world will look, but also passive expression that the player likely won't recognize. Minecraft gives you an opportunity to make a mark on this world, one that's unique to you and who you are, helping realize expression not just through aesthetics, but mechanics and gameplay decisions. So when I scoped out a snowy field in the distance, I had that moment. That was where I was going to build. I ascended a hill that was cut through by a ravine, deciding right away that I'd build a bridge across there, leading to a stairway down to the frozen lake. I was keen to build a simple log cabin, playing into the environment's wintry atmosphere by using the spruce trees that dotted the earth around me. And these are those moments of passive expression. I had chosen a snowy forest with a cozy cabin for a reason, one deeper than because I wanted to, even if it wasn't a conscious one. I'm not a very extravagant person. I like to think I live within my means and not too much further, so my house would be modest. Living in Australia, I can get sick of the heat, and so the idea of a snowy area has always appealed to me, and bad weather is always a good excuse to stay inside. I wasn't just building a cabin in the snow, but a reflection of a pretty introverted person who just wants to be comfortable. Now all of this isn't definitive. Your Minecraft save isn't a crystal clear reflection of who you are. Don't worry, you're not going to jail for killing those villagers. But I think the player's personality can shine through in many different gameplay decisions and player choices, all without the 50,000 plus word scripts that RPGs take to do the same thing, and all without the player really noticing it. And that just shows how much of a success Minecraft can be. So, I knew where my base would be plotted. It was now time to get my bed put down and get to it. I started off with a simple shack, just to have some shelter, as figuring out the logistics, layout and needs for my build would take some time before I actually started putting the blocks down. I had to start planning, and part of that was building a small farm for renewable food. The simplest one to make is a wheat farm. You can get seeds from breaking pieces of grass that scatter the ground. Till a block of land near some water with a hoe, plant the seed and wait for it to grow. This is generally how farming any sort of vegetable or crop works. I think it toes the line between simplicity and complexity really well. There are distinct steps: gathering seeds, tilling the land, maybe finding water or moving it to where you want it to be, before finally planting them. These steps are simple to perform and figure out, ensuring they don't impede on pace or fun, but are still substantial enough to make farming a process, something you have to think about and actively engage in, helping sell the experience. It's also quite accessible. Farming wheat is viable pretty much anywhere and requires few materials, so can act as a fallback if there's no other food around. Conversely, it's not too efficient. 3 wheat can make 1 bread, which fills 2.5 segments of hunger. That's good, but not great. There are aspects of the game that help keep you going if you're desperate, but you never feel cheap for indulging in them. A legitimate sense of survival is fulfilled through them instead. Next was insulation from mobs. If an area is lit up, monsters won't spawn there, so I placed some torches around the small abode. I like how this opens up a new avenue for environmental consideration, not about how you will destroy it or travel across it, but how you will preserve it almost, indenture yourself to this plot and protect it in a way. All of this required a fair bit of crafting unique items and reveals just how great crafting in Minecraft is. I suppose it better be given the game's name, but in my opinion, this is the best crafting system in any game. Basically, any block in Minecraft can be mined and picked up, with all of them being implemented into different recipes. The physicality and cause and effect at play makes crafting feel important and influential. As you craft, you mold the land in the process, chip away at its surface or excavate its innards. The player has a profound impact on the state of the world through crafting. Then the recipes themselves all follow a loose logic, where you can connect the dots as to how the materials, when organized in that pattern, can resemble the end product. This is in stark contrast to other games' crafting systems. In the pursuit of efficiency or feasible implementation, crafting as a mechanic and system has largely been automated and abstracted over the years. An example that comes to mind is The Witcher 3, where the items you pick up all feel very static, becoming obscured as they change from a model in the landscape to a tiny icon in a very specific place in the menu/inventory. Not to mention that all these materials contribute to largely the same types of things, making them blend together until you're mindlessly mashing X to pick things up in the hope that they'll be useful. The size of the map and deluge of generic plants or minerals makes remembering where to find certain things very difficult as well. This results in a very unsatisfying system where no semblance of crafting is happening at all. It feels artificial and removed from the actual world, bogging the experience down and shattering immersion. Minecraft feels totally the opposite. Basically everything you pick up can be placed back down, giving continuity and tangibility to what's in your inventory, feeling real and genuine, like a part of the world you just happen to mine. Then, each of these things contribute to a diverse set of recipes that result in items that serve a diverse set of purposes. What you can craft feels distinct and specific, and so crafting is imperative to take part in. The distinct biomes and rough categorization of items means that knowing where to find something generally isn't too tough. This isn't the case for everything, but more specialized blocks are usually meant to be discovered by the player, with essential materials being more abundant. This combines with the general farmability of many resources to give the player a deep knowledge of where to find or acquire what they need in the moment, despite the world's literally infinite scope. Finally, this is all done manually, in first person, with each step of crafting requiring direct input from the player. It actually feels like you're crafting something new in Minecraft as you arrange the pieces in the grid, some likely having been through a process or two already to get in the state needed. The direct participation and intention needed for crafting could prove tedious, but as recipes become familiar, the process naturally speeds up. Crafting in this game just feels so much more considered. It plays an essential role and understands what the idea of crafting can add to a game. That is a budding relationship with the environment and the resources it houses, a sense of immersion and progress that comes from a constantly expanding knowledge base, and a deeper connection to your decisions and choices as a result. The superiority of Minecraft's crafting is galvanized through its place in time. It wasn't the first game to have crafting, but basically any game that has had it in the last decade likely has it thanks to Minecraft's influence. It seems to me like the prevalence of these systems skyrocketed after its release. And yet, like The Witcher 3, they almost all miss what makes crafting in Minecraft so fun and satisfying. Maybe this feels a bit rambly, but it's earned because it underpins so much of the experience, and if it fell short, the game would suffer immensely. But instead it's executed deftly, perfectly playing into the game's core philosophies around player expression and agency, while making small concessions and conveniences where needed. It's fucking great. So, before I truly got started on my base, I wanted some more resources, so I decided to do some mining. The first step in this process was preparing. You want to account for what you'll be doing, and so deciding what to bring with you is crucial to success. There's the obvious like tools and torches, but then there's other things like some generic stone or dirt for building, or more specialized combat items like a bow or shield. Bringing them will make your journey safer, but it will also leave you with less real estate in your inventory, limiting what you can bring back with you, with a risk-reward scenario cropping up. It also forces you to define your goals. I wanted resources but didn't want to be greedy. I mostly was looking for iron and coal, with rare materials just being a bonus. I had to decide that when preparing so I could best optimize what I'd take with me. And that's really clever. Minecraft is a game with no defined objective or end goal, so instead it uses its systems and mechanics to get the player to make those definitions themselves. And this is all happening before I'm even mining. This can also be affected by how you want to mine. There are tons of naturally occurring caves and ravines rich with resources, but if you want, you can just dig underground and take a more methodical approach. This is usually done at specific Y coordinate levels where certain materials, namely diamonds, are more likely to be found, but that's never been my style, so I went looking for a cave. When you mine this way, you're sort of putting yourself at the world's mercy. The tunnels and passages and caverns have already been generated, but they're completely unknown to you, and thanks to the darkness, teeming with monsters. After I had carved away some of the chaos of the world on the surface to create my own little space, I was now entering back into the mania, and that's really exciting. This is all heightened by the tonal elements like the simple sound effects and weather to create anticipation. This talk of chaos and monsters doesn't mean mining's bereft of beauty though. As I approached a large opening, I peered down and saw the water at my feet rushing into a large verdant cavern with lava spilling across the way. Luminescent vines hung from the ceiling and a small fish swam up the water stream and into the lake behind me. It felt so quaint and lovely. But, true to that chaos I mentioned, as I descended into the cave, I was shot twice by skeletons, leaving me perilously close to the lava. That little vignette kinda gets the appeal of mining in this game across. This newly discovered wonder of the world contrasted by the danger it conceals in its shadowed corners. But back to the visuals. Caves didn't always look this interesting. Over time they've become prettier and more varied in their appearance thankfully, and each one tends to feel more unique in its layout and interplay between wide or narrow areas than it did in previous version. There's generally more life as well, not just through greenery but the presence of animals like bats, axolotls, fish and more. I had gotten particularly lucky, where I had this vibrant cave intersect with an abandoned mine. That scenery with the lava, falling spores and chains suspending the wooden paths was compounded on by a plodding piano-led piece that began to play. It never quite settled into a consistent pattern, mirroring the unpredictability of these mines. After a minute or two it opened up, strings and synths rising and falling at once while squeaky ringing notes bounced around the mix in the background, as though it's bouncing off the walls sealing the underground. This is underlined by the growls and groans of zombies or the chattering bones of skeleton archers, the threat never truly subsiding despite the serene moments of exploration. God, it was so gorgeous and everything felt so right and at home together, despite all being completely random. It captures the beauty of life sometimes, that circumstantial resonance that fills your heart and makes you feel lucky to bask in the moment, where these disparate parts happen to intersect and complement each other perfectly, right in front of your eyes. That's the mood and tone Minecraft can craft when mining. But of course that isn't the entire mining experience. Despite the ever-present randomness, mining still has a multi-level gameplay loop that remains satisfying and rewarding throughout. In fact, implementing that randomness to help it feel fresh. When mining, you're generally clearing an area of enemies, lighting the area up, and then mining what you want from it before moving on. On paper this is really simple and will be exhausted again and again as your expedition continues. This is kept exciting as each room is laid out differently and holds untapped potential in terms of what resources it may be hiding. And thanks to how cave generation has evolved over the years, they do a good job of branching out and opening up as you go, proving to be protracted and complex. This means the player has to make decisions about where they'll go and how they'll navigate the space, interrupting the repetitive motion of mining minerals to stop it from becoming too rote. This short loop is underpinned by a long-term sense of progress. As you delve further into a cave, you tend to auto-descend, getting further and further below the earth. This is where more valuable things like gold or diamonds tend to be, and so there's a feeling of increasing reward as you begin to encounter them. When gold or redstone starts showing up amongst the iron and coal, it feels like an accomplishment, proof that you're making headway. Additionally, getting deeper and deeper also puts you further away from where you entered. As a result, tension is ratcheted up, becoming more aware of your stacked inventory and the labyrinth of tunnels you'll have to find your way back through to get home safely. Maybe this is just me being paranoid, but after an hour or so, I start getting a bit anxious. My supplies like torches are predictably starting to run out and I start trying to remember my path back, sometimes coming up short. Mining is structured to be satisfying and fun in the short term, but risky and dangerous in the long term, with death possibly undermining all your work if you don't make it back to your items, which is unlikely if you'd been underground for a while when you died. This structure naturally eases the player into a tense situation, where the dynamic of progress is threatened by your waning resources and long journey back. There's a distinct gameplay-based narrative that creates a really dynamic experience, one that all the while will help you make strides up on the surface, as all the resources you're collecting have important roles to play in crafting. Keep in mind this all happens emergently and organically, it feels driven by the player and their wishes, respect continuing to be paid to player agency, and I have all this praise without even discussing combat yet. Combat tends to be at its best in a new area, like an unexplored mine. At its core it's quite simple. You can attack, preferably with a sword, but anything will at least do a little damage, block with a shield, or shoot with a bow. Those are the three main ways in which you engage with combat. They're all pretty self-explanatory, an even mix of close and long-range coverage with a defensive capability that slows movement speed so as to not be too overpowered, giving you time to think about how you'll engage. The only additional thing that's crucial to excelling in combat is the cooldown between sword swings. After you swing, a small bar will begin to refill. Swinging before it fully refills will cause you to do less damage depending on how far from completion it is, with the ideal situation being that you wait for it to fully recharge for the most damage. The finer complexities come in the different enemies and their behaviour. I covered this briefly earlier about different mobs focusing on short or long range, speed, or an explosive attack, but that was on the first day when you're under-equipped and merely trying to survive. At this point, with weapons and armour, these properties come into play more. A simple encounter with a zombie and skeleton asks for a decision to be made. Which one do you go for first? The zombie is more immediate, coming right for you, but the skeleton's attacks are harder to dodge. You may discern that the skeleton fires its arrows with a distinct timing and rhythm, and so knowing when to block with your shield becomes easy, letting you focus on the zombie. Or you may want to fight the zombie uninterrupted, so you prioritize the skeleton, exploiting its lack of close-range capabilities. These dynamics shift depending on the type, number, and variety of mobs you're fighting. This approach means that entering into each encounter you have all the pieces, that being how each mob behaves, and all that's left is to decide how you'll arrange them and put them together to best survive. As you go, you'll begin to encounter alternate versions of these mobs, zombies with some armor or a weapon in their hand, a skeleton that fires arrows that slow movement speed, spiders that poison you for a few seconds. These add slight modifiers that will influence how you approach them. It'll be much more punishing to be shot by the skeleton with slowing arrows compared to a normal one, so it'll likely move up your priority list when it shows up. And these are just the basic mobs. As time's gone on, lots of unique monsters have been added to expand the sandbox and further complicate combat in a compelling way. However, I'll cover these more as we continue. For now, the more basic monsters are what's relevant, as they're more core to gameplay, especially mining. Now obviously all of this combat happens in a space, not just some generic flat plane, and as covered, the layout of a cave or area can drastically alter the experience, and that's no different for combat. The landscape adds limitations to work within for each encounter, shifting how you'll engage without displacing the core ideas combat is based off of. For example, an open-ended space does give you more time to breathe, an opportunity to step back and evaluate how to navigate the situation, but it also allows for multiple angles of engagement. Suddenly, the skeleton is behind you while the zombie is in front of you, so using the shield to rhythmically block isn't so simple, your strategy augmenting to accommodate. A simple stone passageway does limit those angles and entrances, but makes getting overwhelmed easier. These are broadly speaking the two extremes of how a space affects combat, but due to the procedural generation of the environment, the spectrum between them is basically infinite. There's also verticality to account for. In a cave, which is liable to have mobs spawn anywhere they can, creepers can drop from a high ledge and take you out instantly, while skeletons can pepper you from above and below. But the space doesn't just work to stack things against you in unique ways. You too can use the environment to your advantage, whether through simple means like shooting arrows from a perch, or more complex methods, like kiting mobs so you can hit them into lava, or lining them up so a skeleton will hit another with an arrow, turning them against each other and taking the hit off you. The last core element of combat is a specific technique, critical hits. This is never told or explained, but if you hit an enemy while you're descending, falling to the ground basically, then you get a crit, communicated by the stars that burst out when done successfully. The reason I'm mentioning it so late is that it's the only real explicitly implemented advanced maneuver in the game. It doesn't redefine fights, but does have an effect. It further builds out the sense of timing that dictates the flow of so much of Minecraft's combat. The way enemies attack, for example the consistent shooting speed of skeletons, and the recharge for full strength sword swings, relegate combat into a subtle understanding of cycles that's noticeable but doesn't make combat feel mechanical or manufactured. Critical hits further contribute to this. The best way to pull off crits is to jump and swing on your way down. As such, these few elements allow for satisfying sequences where you kill all the enemies in the most efficient way possible while taking no damage, all being executed to a distinct set of timings that can line up and intersect for interesting encounters. Believe it or not, this is pretty much the basics of combat. There are other things like potions or enchantments which further modify how fights play out, but we'll save them for later. We've seen repeatedly how a lot can be extracted from a little in Minecraft, how its core systems and gameplay pillars all seem simple and can be engaged with simply if the player wants to, but hide underneath a complex web of design which sees these elements interacting with each other to diversify a playthrough through the creation of really fun and tense emergent moments. I didn't even cover how you can use building in combat, or how combat plays into the anxieties around mining to heighten that experience, but hopefully you can now imagine just how deeply and consistently these things communicate and cooperate in the crafting of your adventure. Despite how much I've rambled on about them, mining and combat aren't perfect. Although they're generally improved by the procedural generation, they also fall victim to it at times. In some instances, fights just aren't that fun or interesting, and a prospective cave turns up empty, either abruptly ending or housing few worthwhile resources, making for lackluster moments and every now and then a feeling of having wasted your time. It's more something you just have to accept, take the good of the spontaneity with the bad of it. Fortunately, on this expedition I didn't have to do that. I found plenty of resources and felt well stocked up to keep moving forward. My successful trip was given applause by the pattering of the rain easing into my ears as I neared the surface, and I was able to easily make my way back thanks to the illumination of the mountain I was starting to call home. Once I arrived, I could start smelting and processing resources for proper use, bringing to a close the rewarding arc of mining that spans the whole expedition. It begins with the planning I covered earlier, to the search for the mine, the actual mining, the backtracking to get to the surface, the trip back home, and finally winding down as you organize and sift through what you managed to collect. This process builds a satisfying journey ripe with anticipation, action, rewards, tension, and a chance to finally wind down at the end, bookending the experience naturally so you can move on. And I plan to move on to finally getting my house going. I feel like building a house is a good litmus test of the game's success. Having a purposefully designed and laid out base doesn't really provide much material benefit in a gameplay sense. You only really need a bed and some chests surrounded by blocks, covered with a roof and lit up by torches. But if you decide to put some real effort into where you'll be sleeping, that demonstrates player buy-in and investment. You've decided that aesthetic, mood, and the environment around you matter to your playthrough, showing your belief and immersion into the world. This is another element that is not at all emphasized by the game itself. Building a house is a purely player-driven decision, only emphasizing what I've said above. Construction like this is a great way to creatively express yourself, to come up with something original and make an impact on what's around you. Many of the other interactions a player can have is sort of destructive, mining things away, killing monsters or animals, etc., but building like this gives a unique opportunity to purely contribute to the world, adding onto it and helping it to grow and evolve. Being so player-led, building like this can be a bit stumping and frustrating, with the clear idea in your head just not translating quite how you'd like it to, but I think the slight constraints help rein concepts in a bit and make them easier to adapt. The blocky, voxel base of Minecraft gives a framework through which building must be considered and applied. As your concept gets filtered through that lens, it will start to take shape, likely in a form not exactly identical to what's in your head, but in one that makes sense for the world and captures the essence of what you're going for. And that process can be immensely satisfying. Building a home like this also provides relatively consequence-free experimentation. Messing around with how the windows in your house will look, for example, just takes building and destroying some blocks, arranging them in ways you find pleasing or compelling. If it looks bad the first time, just take it down and try something else. Finally getting it just how you want it provides that satisfaction I just touched on, with the experience overall having the potential to be possibly the most rewarding part of the game, despite ostensibly offering no reward or benefit on paper. It's pure, unjudged creativity built into a believable world that makes it feel important, foregoing any semblance of traditional progression as a hook, depending instead on our desire to choose how we express ourselves. All of this extends to the details as well. There's a bunch of cute tricks that you can come up with to beautify an area, like using trapdoors on the side of dirt to create planter boxes, for example. Small touches that add so much to the feel of your home. When all is said and done, my house was really pretty basic, nothing too special, but it was memorable and rewarding because it felt like mine. It on some level represents who I am, how I play. I didn't want something big and extravagant, I just wanted something nice, as I covered earlier. As I looked at my base, I was sort of reassured by it. I liked what I felt it said about me, which perhaps is a bit odd, like some sort of virtual materialism, but it felt like a tiny reaffirmation of my personality, and I think it's cool that a game can do that not through intentional guided design, but through a thorough, well-established sandbox, making that whole facet of the game feel seamless and authentic. As I looked upon my construction and reflected on it, however, there was something I had to acknowledge, that being knowledge itself. Something that underlines much of what I've said throughout this video so far is 10 years of playing this game relatively regularly, likely more than 1,000 hours of practice under my belt. This means that playing Minecraft is completely different for me than it is for a new player, even if we both start at a fresh save. That's most evident in how I got through that major first day experience I talked about at the beginning in about 2 minutes. You can see me crafting without the recipe book, knowing recipes off by heart. You can even see me doubling up on certain materials so I can make 2 things immediately after each other, rather than having to take the few seconds to re-enter the materials into the grid. Minecraft just refuses to tell you about lots of itself. This has been remedied to some extent by the recipe book. Before that was introduced, you did just have to memorize how to make things, but it's not perfect. I've always found navigating it a bit of a pain, and it doesn't show everything that can be made, making the discovery of new craftable items tough. Beyond just crafting though, there's general functionality. Inventory navigation is a big deal, but the game never tells you can shift-click something to quickly move it from or to a storage space. You're never told that right-clicking a stack of something halves it, or that picking it up and left-click dragging it evenly distributes it into smaller stacks. Small details like this that drastically speed up playing the game and frankly make it a much less tedious experience are obscured completely. There are tons of small things in this vein that do add up across a playthrough, and the reticence the game has in divulging them to you makes visiting a wiki at some point an inevitability. I have praised the game's hands-off approach, and I stand by those observations, but in some areas it just doesn't work. I do get it, as there's a sort of purity to how little the game butts in to tell you something, but in some areas, like with inventory, this approach feels more like willfully worsening the act of playing the game, when it could easily be added to a tip screen or something that's accessible from your inventory like the recipe book is. That was a lot, and kind of sudden, sorry, but there's really no optimal time to bring it up, as this issue permeates an entire playthrough. That does mean it'll be coming back up, but that won't be for a while, so let's move on for now. With my house taken care of, I wanted to secure a better source of food, so it was time to round some animals up. Different animals will follow you depending on the food you have in your hand, helping you get the start of an animal farm going. You can do this with pigs, sheep, rabbits, chickens, and cows. I wanted to focus on just cows and chickens, as in addition to meat they drop leather and feathers respectively, which are really helpful crafting items. Furthermore, meat has a pretty high saturation value. Saturation refers to how long it will take your hunger to deplete after eating something. The logic is that food like meat is high in protein and so makes you feel fuller for longer, so that's translated in-game via the saturation mechanic and how it slows or speeds up the deterioration of the hunger bar. So with wheat to attract cows and seeds to attract chickens, I descended down the hill to get looking. I was fortunate to find chickens pretty quickly, but then there was the challenge of getting them to the top of the mountain I lived on. This process of having livestock tail you is a really interesting challenge. With less control over how you can navigate the land, lest you stray too far from the animals and they lose interest, the little puzzle from earlier crops up. Like when I was exploring and climbing a big mountain, I now had to consider my surroundings and determine the best path. The day is still passing, and you don't want to be wandering around with nothing but seeds in your hands when monsters start spawning, so the pressure's on. This was ratcheted up as I began the incline, having to carve a completely new path than the one I was used to due to the limited movement animals have. Corralling animals over to your base is not some massive aspect of the game that completely reframes core gameplay mechanics or anything, but it manages to capture a unique sensation. It also ties into farming through how crops are used as the bait. This strengthens the overall feeling of Minecraft, where everything you do inevitably feeds into other parts of the game, whether playing a major or minor role, to make the experience feel holistic and ever-evolving. Having to partake in such a mundane task gives you grace to slow down and appreciate what's around you. It can be easy to get caught up in always looking for the next thing in Minecraft, with so much potential resting beyond your bed, so getting a chance to relax and observe is appreciated. As I brought the chickens back with me, this slow, pensive music underlined my actions. It pulled my focus and caused me to reflect on this from a more emotional angle. I was participating in this ancient human ritual, cultivating the land and working the livestock. There was weight and humanity in these moments. This sounds like a melodramatic interpretation of what I'm doing here, and it is really. But in the moment it felt real. Now in the next moment I was kind of laughing at the notion that Minecraft is some transportative portal to diverse human experience, but I think on some level it's cool that that sentiment can be imparted upon you. If you don't buy into that, it at least shows the power of the music, and the advantage of having a rather malleable mood and set of mechanics that can be impressed upon by outside forces to shape how the player interprets the moment. After I'd got my animals together, I started to plan out their area. I wanted it to be pretty large and well equipped. In part thanks to all the fauna, the world feels genuinely alive, and so I wanted to give my animals room to breathe and walk, the game's ability to reflect the player cropping up again. It's not just the animals that make Minecraft feel alive, but also NPCs. In the past, NPCs felt very static, limited to villagers who never strayed outside their distinct village. It was this weird deal where the world that was begging to be explored was seemingly being ignored by everyone but you. As updates have rolled in, travelling NPCs have been implemented, helping give a greater sense of presence outside of the player themselves. It also means that you don't have to actively search out every interesting feature. Minecraft still wants you to be proactive, but recognises how cool it can be to have someone seek you out and initiate contact. The two primary instances of this are travelling traders and patrols. Travelling traders are pretty self-explanatory. They come by with 2 llamas and offer to trade goods with you. It's a neat way to get items that can be tricky to come by. Patrols are groups of hostile pillager mobs that spawn randomly, wandering around and attacking a village or the player if they come across them. Pillagers all have crossbows and they follow the patrol leader who holds a banner with their face on it. Patrols help to subvert the mood, as your house is supposed to be safe, so them suddenly showing up and attacking really catches you off guard. Well, it at least caught me off guard. Also, having covered combat, you can imagine the unique challenge they pose, a group of long-range combatants who don't give you time to prepare. Wandering traders and patrols contribute to the world's character and help enliven your playthrough, where surprise can be found even amongst the familiar. With the patrol taken care of, I decided to chill out by doing some fishing. All things considered, fishing is rather inconsequential. After crafting a rod with some sticks and string, you cast out with right click, wait for the trail of bubbles to make the bob plunge beneath the surface, and press right click again to retrieve whatever bit. It's not a very involved process and isn't an efficient way to get food. Even the other items you can drag up, like books with enchantments, are pretty hit and miss. But as much as I don't find it interesting, I'm glad it's still in here. It does feel like it captures the essence of fishing to some extent, where you enjoy it for how relaxing and low stakes it can be, poignanted by moments of victory and accomplishment. Having spent a lot of time above ground, I was itching to get back in the mines, hopefully returning with some diamonds. Tools made with diamond are the step above iron in terms of durability and efficiency, also being able to mine obsidian. I talked earlier about the simultaneous long and short-term loop of mining, and how it's further varied by surprisingly dynamic combat. But despite that, there is still the threat of mining becoming boring or repetitive, as it can become something you invest hours upon hours into across a playthrough. However, repetition is offset and instead interpreted as progress thanks to the game's other systems. Delving into the caves this second time, gameplay was quite similar. I even mixed in gameplay from this second session while I was discussing the topic earlier, and you probably didn't notice. But thanks to how the player progresses, both in terms of tangible strides like getting more armor, resources, etc., and in becoming more knowledgeable, the player's familiarity and comfort with the process of mining gets filtered instead as growing skill and ability. That's not to say that having more armor, for example, is a placebo effect, that it makes no difference and is only there to fool the player into brushing over the ever-present gameplay loops, because things like that certainly do make the process more efficient and comfortable. But I do think they recontextualize the circumstances under which the player heads back underground, and by extension their mindset, making them less likely to see how alike each mining mission can be on the surface. So even though my search for diamonds was not too dissimilar from my previous expeditions, it felt wildly different, and was fortunately a success, as I returned with enough to make a pickaxe. As mentioned earlier, with this pickaxe I can mine obsidian. When obsidian are arranged in a 4x5 frame and struck with a flint and steel, a nether portal opens. This is where the issue of knowledge crops back up. A nether portal can't be made in a crafting table, so you can't rely on the recipe book to learn of it. As far as I can tell, the only way you could naturally discern how to make and activate one of these things is through applying some deductive reasoning to one of these ruined portals that can spawn randomly. This is a massive part of the game that's gated off by knowledge that can be gained, but to me feels a little too obscure and out of the way. Luckily, I already knew how to make another portal. I prepared my portal behind my house, lit it, and entered. The Nether is essentially hell, a precarious, antagonistic amalgamation of environments that one minute feel hectic and deadly, and the next barren and desperate. Most importantly, it feels completely different to the overworld while remaining so true to the game's ideals, working brilliantly within those constraints. One thing the Nether does really well is understand the player's approach. The game generally knows that you'll be entering the nether once you've made some decent progress and feel comfortable in your surroundings, so naturally it identifies what makes your first foray into the procedural landscape so intimidating and brings it back to the forefront. Monsters are everywhere all the time, you can't sleep or set a spawn point as beds explode upon interacting with them, and food is scarce and hard to come by. These three things set a baseline for the other elements to build off to further bolster the nether's effect. First, there's the environment itself. As you can see, it's much more unpredictable than the overworld, not needing to feel analogous to real-world formations. Almost everything is tenuously floating above lava, with it leaking out of the nether's pores all over the place. In here it flows much faster and aggressively, making it a much bigger threat. It's also not too uncommon for the ground to have random holes that open up to the lava lake below, hoping to catch you off guard and cruelly plunge you towards your doom. Apropos of nothing, the terrain will flatten out before constricting back into a crowded jumble of blocks, feeling unpredictable and built to confuse you. Finally, there's no sky or stars to look at above. There's a roof of bedrock, the only block in the game that can't be broken, the player always feeling constricted and trapped in some sense. Then there's the monsters that roam these landscapes. Thanks to the character of the environment, you will likely assume that everything's out to get you. However, plenty of mobs in the nether are actually passive until the player provokes them. Thanks to how the nether shapes your expectations, you may very well die to monsters who had no intention of hurting you simply because you assumed they were hostile, attacking them first in hopes of getting the upper hand. When they do attack, it can be pretty deadly. Enemies in the nether like to swarm or hit you with intense knockback, playing into the realm's proclivity for tight, congested spaces, sharp cliffs that lead down to the lava below, and blocks that slow the player's movement speed, making escape hard to pull off. The mobs are intentionally designed to play into the nether's characteristics, heightening the unique sense of danger conveyed here. Finally, the tonal elements. The ambience is ruled by a constant drone, intermingled with deep reverberations that sound like digestive noises. Like you've been dumped into the stomach of the world. It's super unnerving and further bolstered by the sound effects. Most notable to me is the netherrack, the red, brittle rock that most of this realm is made up of. It sort of crunches and squishes under your feet as you walk. This at once makes it feel spongy, fleshy, and fragile. It plays into the gross, organic impression while effectively communicating its frailty, as the explosive fireballs fired by the ghast will destroy it, likely plummeting you into lava. The sound effects of the monsters themselves also help set the tone. The ghast, a ghost-like mob that floats around, will cry out like a child, whimpering pathetically, while piglins and zombie pigmen grunt and snort. The contrast conveyed by the sounds the nether makes leaves you constantly on edge, forever wary of what's around you. Lots of the nether's music actually consists of remixes or alternate versions of songs from the overworld, soured by rustier, harsher notes. That connection to the surface highlights how alienated and uncomfortable you feel down here. It's as though you're listening to them through some radio interference, and only heightens the mood cultivated in this unknown realm. In terms of looks, well, it's pretty obvious. It's largely dominated by the shades of red you'd expect, playing into how the environment can easily make you get turned around and lost. But as development has continued, more diversity has been implemented. The different biomes tend to feel sort of sickly in how bright they are, whether that's harsh reds or nauseating green blues. The warped forest, the biome that makes use of those greeny blues, sticks out in particular. They're obviously the biggest departure from the general theme, but they still ultimately fit in as they appear to be an infectious growth upon the nether. You'll notice that these areas are made up of large fungi, with the stems ran through with what look like veins. In addition, the warped netherrack never extends deeper than one block, making them look like a stain on the environment, tainting and suffocating the blocks below. Visually, the nether balances strategic monotony and deep contrast to great effect, capturing what makes this place so off-putting but alluring. The tonal elements are capped off by a thick view fog which obscures anything too far ahead of you. This stifles the player further, feeling more boxed in and limited overall. And that sensation is what these three areas I've covered in the nether, the environment, enemies and presentation, are working towards. Where the overworld tends to foster player creativity and expression, the nether smothers it and constricts it. The open world fills your lungs with fresh air and leaves you feeling free to do what you like, while the nether impresses upon you, makes breath shallow and desperate as you eke out your time here. However, player agency and expression isn't completely choked out of you by the conditions of the nether. To me, there's an overarching theme here that plays into these ideas, that being greed. You see it all around you, primarily in the more prominent enemies. Zombie pigmen carry gold swords, and while gold tools are shiny and may look nice, they're notoriously fragile, with there being little purpose in using them. Piglins, a more intelligent offshoot of zombie pigmen, can be traded with using gold and don't attack the player if they're wearing a gold helmet. Gold itself is littered around the underworld, and as far as I know is the only mineral found on the surface that's still present in the nether. Gold is a pretty obvious symbol for greed, something that is valuable as a status symbol only within a context that arbitrarily deems it so, having little material applicable value for the average person. Additionally, quartz can be found in the nether. That's important as it doles out lots of experience and is quite abundant, making for a quick way to gain levels. Then there's the excessive, indulgent and almost decadent theming of the nether that's notably less grounded than the other environments in Minecraft. There's little pretense of simulation here like there is in the forests and plains of the overworld. All these details add up to create this through line of greed, culminating in how it courts play, which is where expression comes in. A brash, greedy player, someone who carelessly explores and is desperate for gold and XP, will likely find their untimely demise thanks to the harsh conditions I've covered earlier. But a more wary, careful player will find themselves slowly making progress. There are two main ways in which the player can express who they are, emerging in that passive expression/reflection I've touched on a few times now. Everything I've covered about the nether thus far thoroughly sets it apart as a completely different experience to the overworld, diversifying a playthrough greatly while keeping in line with the design philosophies present in that other realm, of keeping the player ignorant, using procedural generation, and putting together a robust sandbox that ticks away at all times. A testament to the nether's detail, I haven't even covered why you'd actually want to travel here yet. The new possibilities for building and aesthetic blocks and easy XP aren't the only draws. The two biggest are blaze rods, which are used in potion brewing, and wither skulls, which are used to summon a boss. These are dropped by nether exclusive mobs, blazes and wither skeletons respectively. That being said, I wasn't looking for those materials. I spent this initial dive into the nether as simply a way to suss out the spawning area of my portal, and get my head around what the nether was actually like now, as it had seen a lot of changes and updates since I last played properly. So, with my surroundings explored, I headed back home. At this point, I'd taken care of everything needed for survival. I didn't really have to worry about food, shelter, or resources. So why was I still playing? What was my purpose? Well, it had now shifted to the main boss of Minecraft, the Ender Dragon. This, at least for me, tends to become what I work towards once I can easily sustain myself, and acts as a good excuse to indulge in many other systems within the game. Again, I'm not sure how exactly a new player would learn about how to prepare for it and encounter it in general. It all seems rather oblique if I try looking at it from that perspective. To me, it seems like a wiki would unfortunately be an absolute necessity, else you'd get bored before you'd figure it all out. However, I didn't personally have to worry about that. I knew what I'd have to get ready. The two main things I hadn't taken care of were potions, hence the initial foray into the nether, and enchanting, which I was going to take care of now. Enchanting is used to power up items, primarily tools and armor, to give them buffs. These can range from standard things like more efficient mining on a pickaxe or better protection for armor, to specific enchantments like the ability to breathe underwater on a helmet for example. An enchantment table is required to apply these buffs, having to sacrifice a few levels and pieces of lapis lazuli, a blue mineral, in the process. Even getting to the point where you can enchant something cleverly pulls from pretty much every major aspect of the game you've experienced so far. You need to mine the diamonds and obsidian to get the table in the first place, and then need lapis to actually enchant. Leather, best gained through farming cows, is needed to construct bookshelves, which unlock greater levels of enchanting if arranged around the table. Then there's the player's level itself, which is contributed to by most actions you can engage in, but most notably combat. These upgrades tie into so many segments of the game that they feel critical, like a meaningful investment and culmination of your time spent. You can again see all these systems and mechanics overlapping and interacting to create a really complete playing experience. As for the actual act of enchanting, you're presented with 3 tiers of enchantments, gated by a specific level you must be at to access it, with each one allowing you to apply more powerful buffs. You're given a peek at what one of the buffs you will get is, but the final outcome is ultimately random. I could see this being frustrating, with something this important being so up in the air once you get to the final step, but I personally like it. If you invest in the highest level enchantment, you'll typically get at least one worthwhile buff, so the randomness is never too cruel. I also find it makes it more exciting. If it really does bother you though, there is a detour you can take. By enchanting singular books at lower levels, you can accrue multiples of, say, sharpness 1 enchantments. You can then combine these and end up with a single book that now has a higher level of sharpness on it, before finally applying that to a sword, though this method takes significantly more levels to pull off. Enchanting manages to be a really fun part of the game that produces immediate benefits to play, proving its worth right away and encouraging experimentation with all the different enchantments available. It's also gated cleverly by needing materials like diamond and obsidian to partake in it, generally ensuring that the player has gear worth enchanting once they have the table and books required. Minecraft will regularly funnel the player in a certain direction of progression without obstructing their agency, using its well thought out sandbox to achieve it, and enchanting is a good example of that phenomenon. Before I actually did my first bout of enchanting, I wanted to create a dedicated themed room, leaning into the fantastical nature of the act. I had tons of fun doing this and was super happy with the final product, especially with shaders on. Shaders are user-generated modification packs that change how lighting, shadows, water, and other graphical elements appear in-game. These are primarily built around implementing more realistic effects and are pretty graphically intensive. I remember suffering through frame rates in the teens when I was younger because I thought my shaders looked so cool, with my laptop practically taking off as it begged for mercy. The severity of the changes vary from pack to pack, and at times they can be a bit overdone, but I do like how they look, with them often enhancing the mood I feel. This is just one aspect of player-controlled visual customization though. Minecraft, at least the Java version I'm playing, I believe the Windows 10 version is more locked down, allows for a fantastic amount of customization in the visual sense, and it's all relatively easy to perform, with the game implementing menus to simplify the process, embracing what fans have created. There's a few default skins you can choose from, but you aren't limited to these textures, as you can make your own or download a player-created one and use that instead. It's a very small thing, but it's another way for the player to express themselves and connect with the world. Most importantly, it gave me a way to play as Naked Snake from MGS3 in a game again, because Konami refuses to make that happen. Beyond changing the texture of the player character, you can also download texture packs that change how everything in the game looks. These tend to follow themes like a medieval pack or cartoon pack, or maybe something that is just slightly higher resolution than the default textures. It can completely change how the world feels and even influence how you build. A medieval pack looks better when you lean into that style, for example. I didn't play with shader or texture packs on at all times, just to keep closer to the vanilla experience seeing as I'm analysing the game, but they open up avenues for greater player expression and choice. Minecraft's commitment to these ideas holding true even outside of the moments when you're actively playing it. Now that I had my enchantment room, and it looked prettier than ever thanks to shaders, I got my tools powered up and started prepping to take on the Nether Fortress and make some progress towards potion brewing, the Ender Dragon fight slowly approaching. I was very cautious in my explorations of the Nether, thoroughly watching my surroundings and using cobblestone to build as it can't be destroyed by ghast blasts. I was pretty fortunate and spotted the telltale rigid maroon make of the Nether Fortress soon after heading out, not too far from my portal. Nether Fortresses tend to be a sprawling series of corridors that branch off regularly, spanning a few different levels and sporting chests at pretty regular intervals, containing loot like minerals, horse armor, saddles and rare blocks. These rewards encourage the player right away, egging you on to move further into the fortress and making it more likely you'll come across the real valuable stuff. The nether brick around you, which can initially feel comforting as it appears more robust than the frail netherrack, soon melds together, making the exploration experience purposefully samey and hard to discern. Getting turned around is very easy, especially as paths intersect and overlap, simple measures like using torches to mark your path no longer proving effective. This simple structure is focused on order and predictability, in stark contrast to the chaos that rules the rest of the nether, making these fortresses contextually more dangerous as they break convention for the area while still being victim to the subjects of that chaos. Ghasts, zombie pigmen and sudden drops into lava still showing up here and there. This is of course happening amongst the fantastic vibe and atmosphere of the nether. With its unsettling groans and creaking cavernous whimpers, making the act of exploring a nether fortress kinda haunting and creepy. As I crept along, I encountered plenty of wither skeletons, one of the 3 true valuable finds here. These are skeletons wielding swords that infect you with wither when attacking, essentially poison. When killed, they have a chance to drop one of their skulls, which is used in the summoning of a boss. They only spawn in or around nether fortresses, I believe, and help give a unique character to them in terms of combat, the narrow corridors making them tough to maneuver around, forcing confrontation from the player. The second of these 3 valuable items is netherwort. This grows in particular rooms of a fortress and is a vital part of potion brewing. Finally, there's blazes. These only spawn from actual blaze spawners and float around and fire a barrage of fireballs at the player. They seem to have a pretty large aggro range, and so it's not uncommon to find them sprawling above a fortress, attacking you from different angles as you peek out of an opening. They act as a great nuisance during combat, and as they tend to spawn in groups, prove difficult to take down, with one often firing as the others recharge their shot. I had managed to find a spawner with a shallow roof above it, helping keep them contained, and so prepped the area surrounding it. I built cobblestone walls to seal me off and give me a safe spot to retreat to should things heat up too much. At first I had to peek in and out, taking shots to kill the initial wave, my power 3 bow proving its worth. Once they were taken care of, I could enter the spawning area and get the upper hand once they appeared. It was like a little siege, and shows how building can augment encounters to make them more unique and interesting. It proved a great success, ending up with 7 blaze rods, which I used to create and fuel a potion stand. These 3 valuable elements I've touched on, the wither skeletons, the netherwort and blazes, all tie into potions. The latter 2 more directly, with the boss, summoned via the skeletons, being made considerably easier if potions are prepared beforehand. This through-line gives the fortress a strong sense of purpose and identity, again funneling player progress through natural means, one that the player accepts willingly thanks to the fun it comes with. As I cautiously ventured back with my pockets full, music started to creep in, a brooding, ominous song that bloomed as it went, darkening further as the bass started to command more attention, becoming wanting and desperate. As it did so, I was confronted with piglins, my sword breaking during the tense encounter. I was determined to get back to my portal, convinced something was about to go wrong. The song peaked and began to calm back down as I took the final 2 out from afar. I quickly entered the portal and made it back home, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. This miniature story, one that I was incredibly invested in, one that I took part in, played out almost entirely thanks to the influence of the music, with its ability to manipulate the moment. This is something I've brought up a few times, but that's not just to fill space. Look back at when I've highlighted this phenomenon and see just how diverse and disparate the circumstances are. It's a testament to just how significant the soundtrack is to Minecraft's experience, to encouraging the player to acknowledge the circumstances and importance of each moment. In this case, it was a wonderfully tense end to my expedition to the fortress. Now it was time to make some potions. The process is as follows. Place your potion stand, fuel it with blaze powder, place bottles of water in the stand, and then brew netherwort into them, giving you a base awkward potion to work with from there. Different materials create different potions, like magma cream for potions of fire resistance or glistening melon for potions of healing. Beyond the type of potion, particulars like strength, duration of effect, and method of application can also be changed, using specific resources. There's a great amount of customization that fits within a pretty strict process, giving this ritual constraints that make experimentation viable. You'll notice that a particular type of resource is used for brewing potions. Not blocks or minerals, but consumables or things mobs drop when they die. This narrows the scope down, and consists of items you likely will have collected without knowing what to do with. This leaves most players with a solid group of materials to experiment with, so they can suss out what can be made and the method behind doing so. There's also player decision here. Like mining, you want to define what will best suit whatever situation you're preparing for, forcing you to put your knowledge and intuition to good use, adding a sense of strategic thinking to the large encounters potions are best used for. I quite enjoy brewing, and like enchanting, it pulls from many different parts of Minecraft to likewise feel meaningful, all while proving to be as valuable as it comes off, as we'll see later. With my potion brewing set up for when I'd be taking on the Ender Dragon, I decided to move on to the next piece of preparation, securing a horse. Horses, like any other animal, spawn randomly around the world, usually in groups, so it just takes some exploring to find one. They simply act as a good way to get around, being quite fast and having a good jump, which would be helpful for the next part of my goal to defeat the dragon. Version 1.6, the update through which horses were released, was actually the first major update to come out since I began playing. Adding another animal to the sandbox was a pretty big deal at the time, as the wildlife of environments could get stale with the same small group to pull from. Thankfully, that's changed dramatically in the years since, as there's a pretty diverse set of fauna to be found as you explore. The most important ones are those that have deeper interactions. Horses are an obvious example as covered, but there's also wolves. These can be tamed with bones and follow you around, attacking mobs as they get near, and cats, when tamed with fish, will ward off creepers and phantoms. These add a nice note of complexity to the game while not interfering with the player too much, making them a worthwhile but not necessary investment. Then there's the swath of other animals like frogs, foxes, dolphins, polar bears, pandas, and many more. These help biomes feel more alive and deeper in their theming, adding to the ambience of exploration. They also tend to have a touch of unique interaction, like foxes getting stuck if they jump into a snow block, something to add character. After searching for a while, I came across some horses and managed to snag one. They each have different characteristics in terms of how many hearts they have and how high they can jump, but as far as I know there's no way to actually tell this without taming one, so I usually just pick the one I like the look of the most. Riding a horse is pretty simple, but can get frustrating. As you're now taller, you'll often find your view obstructed in dense biomes like forests. They also can't swim, and so getting across water is a cumbersome task. These limitations make sense, but ultimately stop the horse from feeling as influential to exploration as they potentially could be. There's of course how world generation factors into this. You can just get unlucky and find yourself in an area with lots of rivers or lakes, in which case travelling with a horse just got tougher. This does mean they have distinct pros and cons, things you must take into account and work around, so I suppose they just provide a new challenge, which you could argue is a good thing, recontextualizing how you think and navigate exploration. The reason I wanted a horse is because in order to fight the Ender Dragon, you have to make it to the End, a realm accessed only by a portal, much like the Nether. Unlike the Nether, however, the portal can't be crafted, it has to be found. These portals spawn in strongholds underground. By combining an Ender Pearl and one blaze powder, you can make an Eye of Ender, which when thrown will float in the direction of the stronghold. Using this method, you can zero in on the portal, though it's not guaranteed to be close, hence the horse. Before I could head off, however, I needed those Eye of Ender. I'd gotten really lucky in this respect. 1, blaze rods can be tough to find, but I'd already taken care of that thanks to a fortunate nether fortress spawn. 2, ender pearls are dropped by endermen, a strong mob that teleport around rapidly and can be quite rare themselves. In regards to these, I'd found that they were spawning pretty regularly in the nether, and my sword had the looting 2 enchantment on it, which meant that things killed with it are more likely to drop more loot. So I got off pretty easy, and had enough ender pearls and blaze rods to take care of finding the stronghold relatively quickly. Now it was time to actually find it. The process of discovering the end portal is pretty convoluted, but I think it's a good choice. Like enchanting or potion brewing, finding the end portal acts as a good culmination of the experience, interacting with all corners of the game and appropriately building off the progression the player's made thus far. There's also the allure and mystery that helps it. It can get away with being gated off by this discovery process as it's removed from the more grounded, core overworld experience. The portal, ender pearls, blaze rods, they're all completely fictional, and so don't need to adhere to firmer logic like that of base survival and crafting, instead staying true to an internal logic specific to Minecraft. It also helps that it's just plain fun. Embarking out on this important adventure is exciting, and up until this point there's not really been a reason to do so that's not decided upon by the player. This search for the portal makes you indulge in exploration with your best, latest gear, making your growth plain to see and feel, deepening investment. There's also the deductive aspect of it, using the Eyes of Ender to scope out where to go, at the same time combining above and below ground exploration. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I spent a decent amount of time deciding what to bring, balancing out what would help versus what I was willing to lose. Also making sure I had supplies to build a little base at the portal's location, as I imagined a few trips would be needed for preparing for the actual fight. It wasn't too eventful at first. I diligently followed the eyes while being sure to space out my throws, as they do have a chance to break. I was thrown a bit of a curveball when after the first night I was shortly met with open ocean and an Eye of Ender that insisted that was the way to go. So I tied up my horse, built a tower with torches as a landmark, crafted a boat and headed out. I rode to the next major landmass in the hopes that the portal was there, but my eye hovered back the direction I came, meaning it was somewhere between here and where my horse was, that being the deep ocean. This raised a few issues. Primarily, the Eyes of Ender would plunge back into the water after being thrown, meaning I had to dive under for them, risking drowning depending on how deep the water was, or death from drowned, which are essentially water zombies. Then there was the inability to build. Once I pinpointed where it was, I had to figure out how to actually get down there, safely. Which is hard to do when the only place you can build blocks on is the ocean floor. In the moment, I was wishing the portal had just been on solid ground, as it would have simplified things greatly, but looking back I'm glad it was like this. It posed a super unique challenge, and being so far away from home, roughly 2,500 blocks, it was all imbued with the stress and pressure that comes from being an hour deep into mining, where dying is more and more dire of a thought. It also, this late in the game, captured that feeling of raw survival again, which I was grateful for. I ended up isolating a single block all the way down to the ocean floor and then hollowing it out, effectively giving me a more controllable point of entry. Now it was time to actually explore the stronghold. Searching the stronghold is not all that different from looking around a mine, where the rewards aren't minerals but cool unique rooms like libraries or prisons. I had a great time at first looking around, trying to be strategic and methodical so I didn't miss a single room. However, over time it dragged on. I searched this place top to bottom for like 2 or 3 hours, but I just couldn't find the end portal room. Then there was a sinking feeling starting to set in. What if this stronghold spawned without a portal room? I had heard of that happening before. I was pretty desperate and so just started mining out walls in the hopes of running into some disconnected part of the stronghold. And that's how I ended up finding it, which really soured the whole search. The procedural generation had kinda just fucked me here. There had been this cool emergent narrative playing out, the preparation, exploration, hardships on the sea, and finally searching for the portal itself in the stronghold, which ended up being failed by how it generated within the world. It was really unfortunate and goes to show what a fine balance between fun and frustration Minecraft can be trying to strike. The fact that it mostly manages to find fun is impressive, but that frustration can come at the most inopportune times. Like here, where a really critical part of Minecraft's content gets mangled and misrepresented. Despite my bitterness, I was glad to have found the portal. Now it was time to cart the resources I needed over here and get ready for this fight. I made my way back to my base and picked up what I thought I would need. Stacks of cobblestone, dirt, some wood, food, tools and weapons, potions of strength, healing and swiftness, a water bucket, torches and some ender pearls. I felt well equipped but still nervous. It had been a long time since I'd done this fight. The game does a great job of ascribing importance and anticipation to the encounter. Most of the different mechanics and features of the sandbox logically converge and kite the player towards this point. Even things which already pull from different aspects of the game, like potions and enchanting, feel like they're best put to use in this fight. There's also the presentation. Once you fill the frame with the Eyes of Ender, it jumps to life with a bang. Its nebulous surface following your line of sight, as though what's through there is endless. Then there's its positioning, as something you have to plunge into, having to literally take a leap of commitment to fighting the dragon as there's no easy way back. You're spawned on a platform of obsidian, having to either build or use an ender pearl to get to the porous husk of landscape ahead of you. The blank canvas of a skybox makes it feel like there's no atmosphere, as though you're between worlds, trapped. Its colour contrasts the bone-white islands, with the end taking a more minimalist approach to set it apart. This also places importance and focus on the dragon, whose health bar shows up soon after entering the new realm, that too appropriately distancing it from normal fights. It flies around in circles in the distance, as though surveying for intruders like you. The music backs up the stripped back technique, remaining ever present but subtle, a constant reminder. The end is centralized and focuses on this fight on all levels, and does a good job of justifying a boss fight in a game that it would otherwise feel out of place in, what with how it tries to equalize gameplay experiences so the player can decide what's important to pursue or not. Minecraft stays true to itself throughout the encounter, best exemplifying that through the beginning, or rather the lack thereof. There's no cutscene, graphic, or anything to signal that it's started. Instead, the player has to be the one to initiate by seeking it out and getting within its range. The game's still relying on your agency for the experience to push on. To take down the dragon, the player first has to eliminate the 10 end crystals that rest atop the obsidian pillars, so that the dragon can no longer use them to regenerate her health. Some are bare, making shooting them down from the surface easier, but others are caged in, and so you gotta start scaling them. This does a good job of incorporating building into the fight. The dragon is made invincible, forcing the player down this path of building up, but keeping the pressure on thanks to the ever-present dragon and her intermittent attacks. This primarily comes in the form of a fireball which explodes into poisoning particles that linger on the ground for a while, also having some knockback properties. This creates a compelling decision regarding how you scale these towers. Being more thorough and careful leaves you exposed and open to a fatal fall for longer, while rushing poses more risk of the player making a mistake, but lessens exposure to the dragon. This makes this section of the fight super intense, and I found myself regularly looking around, alarmed by the dragon's roars circling above, my finger pressed tightly on the shift key to hopefully avoid a fall. Once I was atop one of the towers, I diligently tried to shoot as many others as I could from my position, which would come back to bite me later. This phase of the fight can drag on, but I generally feel that the initial high wanes into a simmering tension that keeps you on your toes, helped along by the lack of music, eerie atmosphere, and precarious position you're put in. For me, this all came to a head when, while descending from the final tower, I was, I think, because you can't definitively tell from the footage, knocked off by the dragon as it flew through me, causing me to fall to my death. This really sucked, but was also kinda cool as I was then super panicked and hauling ass to get back to my gear. I raced back and sorted it all out in a small cobble bunker, soon emerging to start the next phase. This just involves killing the actual dragon. She will generally fly around for a bit, firing projectiles as she goes, before eventually converging on the center of the arena, giving you a chance to attack with a sword while she uses her damaging breath attack. This mixes short and long range combat well and helps put you in more immediate danger by baiting you to get closer to the dragon. This is also where the endermen really come into play. Even though you're likely on the ground now, they can be easy to avoid as you hone in on the dragon, which naturally draws your line of sight away from the endermen, quashing the threat they pose. However, this makes them easy to ignore, and so as the dragon descends to the surface, you may accidentally make eye contact, with the panic that ensues possibly causing you to aggro even more of them. This happened to me a couple of times, and helped bring the feeling of core Minecraft combat into this boss fight. My heart was really racing now, and as a result I made a couple of key mistakes. The first was forgetting to re-equip my shield. Then there was me being so eager to get sword hits that I forgot to let the bar recharge, mashing instead. And then I paid for the mistake of using so many arrows on the towers as I eventually ran out. This led to a really intense start to this phase where I was vulnerable but on the offensive, an uncharacteristic approach for me, a testament to the weight and atmosphere of the fight. There were even a few moments where the knockback from the dragon's body flew me up into the air and I was able to save myself with a bucket of water. This boss fight felt like it was doing a great job of incorporating so much of the core experience and I was really digging it. But that didn't last throughout the whole thing. The primary cause of this lull is just the dragon's behavior. It loves to just fly around and not really do anything, occasionally firing slow-moving fireballs that obscure a small patch of the ground for a short amount of time, doing little to impair the player's ability. This doesn't matter as much when you have arrows to shoot, but as I said, I ran out eventually. Now on the surface this was cool. A fault in my preparation and performance in the fight left me at a disadvantage, ready to be punished via taking more damage or dying. But in practice, I was now just left watching the dragon, for sometimes 2.5 minutes, fly around aimlessly while I waited for the 15-second window in which I could actually attack with my sword. Now there are the projectiles that she fires, but not only are they easy to avoid, as covered, but the dragon will often fly into them after shooting them, causing them to detonate in midair, making them completely useless. The Ender Dragon's AI just feels janky, meaning that once you actually start fighting the thing, it slowly becomes less and less imposing. Then there's another problem. Sword swings not connecting. Whether my sword actually hit the dragon or not felt like luck, as I'd sometimes be right up on it swinging away to no avail, which again was only prolonging the fight further. Finally, the lack of impact of death. If you put any thought into your approach, then you will have slept in a bed right outside the end portal. This makes death only a momentary setback instead of a failure state. This is sort of unavoidable. Making death an instant loss would be exhausting, especially as we've seen how much the fight can languish already, and so having to redo bits would be a pain. On the other hand, having the player lose all their items to give death some real weight would feel inconsistent with the rest of the game, where your items remain in the world for a few minutes after dying. And so you're left with this strange half measure, where you can weirdly die and re-enter the fight endlessly, really losing nothing at all and completely sucking the tension out of the encounter. I've talked about how parts of Minecraft are interestingly incorporated into this fight, like building and resource management, but unfortunately the core of its being, that being the always alive sandbox, combines with lackluster enemy behavior and tactics to create a fight that I feel makes a brilliant first impression, but ends up leaving you bored and hoping for it to end already. I still had tons of fun and plenty of great moments, but that issue of having to take the good of Minecraft's sandbox and procedural generation with the bad of it, unfortunately rears its head again, in what's supposed to be the most important encounter of the game. After like 20 minutes, I at last dealt the final blow, glad for it to be over in part because I could put it behind me, but also because it was what my progress thus far had been leading to. I still on some level felt accomplished for having overcome it. I was rewarded with my 60 levels of XP and Dragon Egg, and leapt into the portal, taking me to the credits. They start out with a poem which takes shape as a dialogue between two beings who say that they're the entire universe outside of the player. Appropriately, the ending, much like the rest of Minecraft, is centered around the world, the sandbox, the environment, and how the player interacts with it all. The speakers talk of the interplay between the player's life in Minecraft and their life in the real world, though they never directly interfere, understanding that the player's ability to decide and determine must be respected. The world of Minecraft and the real world get interchanged as the poem progresses, with ones and zeros compared to electrons and neutrons, tacitly acknowledging the heart and soul poured into Minecraft as an interactive experience, not just from the player but also the developers. Towards the end, one final comparison is made, tangling the two worlds together once again and focusing on the words on the screen, the poem, so that the universe can profess to the player that they love them, that they played well, that they believe in the player, and so on. As this happens, the music morphs from a dynamic piano-led piece that rises and falls in tenacity and weight to something much more electronic, something that bubbles up and mirrors the feeling of accomplishment that rises from the universe's compliments, before the two parts of the music converge and combine for the universe to finally ask you, the player, to wake up, to get back out there, whichever there it may be. This doesn't happen, of course, you still got 30 minutes of credits to wait through. I do quite like this poem. It understands the role the world played, how it gave so much while still honouring the player's agency and choice. The conversational approach gives it a unique flow that's followed through on by a tone that fluctuates between familiarity and purposefully poetic and affecting affectation and wording. It builds off the likely large time investment the players made into their journey to capture emotion, highlighting the relationship you build with the game and your world before ending in a way that feels final yet open-ended, forcing the player to make one more important decision. Will you stop and enter back into your world, or keep on playing and continue in this one? This ending felt so right, and I was pretty emotional as it played out, eventually making my decision. Of course I was gonna keep going. Look how much time is left in this fucking video. After spending a lot of time working towards the Ender Dragon, I now wanted to chill out and spruce up my base a little. Before getting started on this, I made a couple golems to help defend so I didn't have to worry about nighttime as much. There are two types, iron golems and snow golems. Each one will attack any hostile mobs as it dawdles around, though the iron golem is much more effective due to its strength and durability. These golems are a small addition that help build out Minecraft's scope and possibility, slotting in nicely as something fun and extra, while adding at least some practical benefit. I decided I wanted to add a redstone door to my enchanting room, to hide it more and add to the overgrown/magical theming. Redstone is a mineral found in caves which gives you redstone dust when broken. This redstone dust can transmit a power signal, kinda like a wire or cable. This can be used to power different components, like in my case pistons which will push or pull blocks, revealing the entrance down to the enchanting table. These signals can be sent by different sources like a lever or button. For my door I used a pressure plate, so when you walked over it and pushed it down, a signal was sent to the pistons that would retract and open the door. Redstone can also be used to create more complicated tools like repeaters or comparators for use in more involved contraptions. Overall, it's an incredibly versatile tool, one that can be used for simple things like my door, or incredibly complex things like a working version of Tetris. The things that have been made with redstone are seriously impressive, and as the game has been updated, new items have been added, like a target that sets off a signal when hit with a projectile, for example. I don't believe the core rules and logic of redstone have really changed, but rather been added onto through the addition of these new redstone tools, helping it be expanded upon without undermining what people who like redstone can do with the material. Like much of Minecraft, redstone is simple enough on the surface to get some use out of, but wildly open-ended, encouraging creative exploration and experimentation. This lets it play into Minecraft's penchant for respecting player agency and expression. Someone like me may use it in a rather rudimentary way for purely aesthetic purposes, but another player could use it for automating a farm or to create a monster spawner that can be used to quickly gain levels and so on. No matter how you play, you're bound to find some way to implement redstone in a way that makes sense to you, and if you aren't, then no biggie, you don't even have to engage with it. That all being said, redstone does suffer from the knowledge problem I've established. the rules and specificities of redstone are rather oblique. Figuring out exactly how a signal is transmitted, what will and won't block it, how tools like repeaters work, etc. can take pretty exhaustive experimentation to find out. I suppose on some level that makes sense, as this is probably the most technical part of the game, but it ultimately means that truly understanding redstone practically makes a wiki or guide required. The one redstone area that subverts this is minecarts. These can be put on rails and ridden in to get around faster or equipped with chests, so you can cart materials back and forth while mining. I remember years ago I made a save where me and my brother had a house in every single type of biome and connected them all with railways to move between them easier. Redstone comes in with powered rails. By crafting these rails and placing redstone torches next to them, you can get a boost of speed when riding over top of them. This can help get up inclines or just generally speed the process up. There's also detector rails, which set off a signal when ridden over. I'm sure there's further layers of complexity here, but I feel that the fact that these are incorporated in the railway themselves makes them easier to grasp, work with, and wrap your head around, as they slot into a different system with simpler rules rather than being within their own ecosystem and logic. They weren't too helpful for me this playthrough as my area was pretty modest, but they can serve many different purposes, whether for fun or functionality. Finally, there's the aesthetic of redstone. I really like that it manifests as not a literal wire or cable, but a trail of dust. It fits into Minecraft's loose medieval fantasy theming, where the use of modern electrical analogs would feel too advanced for the world of Minecraft that technologically relies more on magical elements than scientific ones. There's also whimsy to it, like how you can make pistons that stick to blocks not by using a traditional glue or adhesive, but rather balls of slime that you get from slime monsters. The fact that a mechanic this steeped in logic and technicality stays true to the game's theme is impressive and helps it feel at home in the experience. This is generally something that I feel Minecraft has done well. If you look at the modding scene, there's always a big push to make Minecraft more technologically advanced, to get more complicated, but I really love how dedicated the game has remained to its unique mixing of fantasy and Middle Ages tech. This is also exemplified through the additional overworld structures that are generated. With my small stint in redstone over, I wanted to do some more exploring and so went looking for said structures. The three main ones I was looking for were the desert and jungle temples and the woodland mansion. Like villages, these spawn randomly in their designated biome, and more serve to shake up exploration and provide a bit of loot, acting as something you can dip into as you come across them, rather than having to prepare for them like you do at the end. The jungle and desert temples are rather old additions, being added in the second half of 2012. They both do a really good job of mirroring their environments. The jungle temple is made out of mossy stone, appearing abandoned and overtaken by the dense greenery that surrounds it. Inside are traps, subtle tripwires which set off arrows with a chest at the end containing lackluster loot. This is just a decoy, as a lever must be pulled to reveal the real loot chest. This temple feels hidden away and discreet. This is contrasted by the desert temple. The interior is comparatively open-ended, with much more room to breathe. Rather than concealing its traps, it hides them in plain sight, using coloured clay to highlight a particular block. If you mine that block out and jump down the hole, you don't trigger a simple arrow but rather an over-the-top explosion of TNT, killing you and spilling the contents of the surrounding chest everywhere. This is how the desert can feel in general, where at night mobs freely roam, spawning in pretty large numbers thanks to the expanse of flat ground. I really love these two structures, the way they spice up exploration and play into the apocalyptic feeling of the environment that I've mentioned, but they feel a bit weird in the current version of the game. The cumulative approach to development that Minecraft has taken means that older features like these naturally get left in the dust as the game begins to outgrow them in scope. The loot in these things is really not all that useful, and they feel stagnant, like a remnant of the game's prior ambitions. It didn't help that in my case I was doing this after the dragon. I had clearly progressed past the need for them, but I feel like the level of complexity pales in comparison to structures added later on in development, like woodland mansions or water monuments. This can easily be seen as a positive or negative though. On one hand, I wish these got updated and turned into larger experiences, as I have lots of fond memories of first discovering them when I was playing the Xbox 360 version back in the day, and so I want them to remain relevant. But on the other hand, them becoming more obscure does in some sense heighten their effect. There's no item exclusive to these temples that's required for something else, and so it's more likely that the player will come across them completely at random, getting that genuine excitement from finding something new like this. That's something you can generally see happen as Minecraft has grown, the struggle between old and new, and deciding when something old should be made to feel new again. This revamping of old concepts generally seems to be restricted to more core experiences. You can see that with how combat was changed by adding the cooldown bar, and with how cave generation was made more interesting and visually diverse. In my opinion, it has proven to be largely successful, but it can leave some content in an awkward position, like these temples, which used to feel like major additions but currently feel forgotten about, not matching the ambition of the content added later. That became obvious as I next went to find a woodland mansion. Whereas the temples are quick 2-minute affairs for some loot, woodland mansions take up to an hour to thoroughly clear, primarily in search of totems of undying. These are held by evokers, and if you die while holding one, you'll be brought back to life. The mansion spans a few floors with a diverse set of themed rooms, interspersed with vindicators and the aforementioned evokers, strong enemies that resemble villagers. They pose a pretty good challenge, with the simple layout and geometry of the mansion making them hard to dodge or get around. You pretty much have to fight them to make it through. On top of this, the light level is low enough that normal mobs will spawn as well. Much of Minecraft's exploration is about keeping track and making sure to not get turned around, but the mansion is refreshingly systematic, with its distinctly cordoned off rooms and clear delineation of floors. This really lets the theming, and as touched on, combat, shine. So you can see how the temples could feel like they've been left behind, when the generated structures implemented since all feel much more purposeful and content rich. There's also a difference in distribution of content. The temples, as small as they are, have a beginning and end point. However, if you really want to, you can just break all the blocks between that start and end to skip the traps and such. The mansion, on the other hand, ties its most valuable loot, the Totem of Undying, to a specific enemy type, which can spawn on any floor. So even though you can just build up to the top floor and break in, that's not guaranteeing a shortcut to what you're looking for. Something that is fun about features like the temples staying the same as time goes on, is seeing design choices, in this case distribution of loot, shift to better work within Minecraft's constraints. So, I had gotten the chance to explore all 3 of these structures and headed back home. Next on my list was the Wither, another piece of content that, as we'll see, plots a change in how new features would be implemented into the game. The Wither was the second boss added to Minecraft, implemented as a part of the version 1.4.2 update in late 2012. To summon the Wither, you must place 3 Wither skulls on top of 4 pieces of arranged soul sand. After charging up, the fight will begin with an explosion. The Wither floats around, each head having the ability to independently fire projectiles at the player, dealing 2.5 hearts and inflicting the Wither status effect, continuing to do damage. This is all while slowly regenerating its health. At half health, it gains more resistances, notably to bows and arrows. Once defeated, it drops a decent amount of experience and a nether star, an item needed to construct beacons, which can provide buffs within their given radius. It can prove to be a pretty tough and explosive fight, and so I made sure to prepare well. I got myself some enchanted diamond armor, brewed some more potions, made some more golden apples, and headed off. Something I really like about this fight is the control you have over it. As you're the one who summons the Wither, you get to choose where it's summoned, providing you with a vital decision to make. Putting it out in the open makes avoiding its attacks easier, but also makes it harder to hit and confine. Conversely, summoning it underground is more directly dangerous. There's also the option of building your own arena, though the destructive nature of the fight makes building a truly secure one pretty tough. This is a switch in dynamic from the Ender Dragon. In that fight, you were walking onto her turf, clashing on her terms. Here it's the other way around. It also allows for the unpredictability of the world to come into play. Starting the fight underground means that the Wither may blow out enough blocks to open up a cavern or a lake of lava, giving a potentiality to the encounter that's really exciting. I personally went for underground, ultimately feeling that keeping it trapped would serve me well, especially with my smite enchanted sword which would do extra damage, so I slept in a bed nearby and summoned the Wither. The cave I found had a rather shallow ceiling which initially proved advantageous, allowing me to get some easy shots off. However, the narrow lines of sight soon proved restricting, my shots colliding with these surrounding blocks as I was peppered with attacks. Luckily I got it down to half health and it was time to get in there with my sword, making sure to have an apple and potion on the go. Its health rapidly dwindled under my swings, but light was scarce thanks to the explosions knocking off my torches, and I was really getting slapped around. I narrowly evaded death, finding a nook to hide away in and eat up, before emerging for one final barrage of attacks, taking the Wither down. So you can see even further contrast in how efficient and hectic that was compared to the languishing, drawn-out fight against the dragon, or more accurately her AI. This proves to have its merits, but also some drawbacks. The merits are in just how different the fight can feel. There's not just the ability to choose where you fight, but the fact that it feels more combat forward, as opposed to the dragon encounter which relies on more deduction. The entire Wither fight felt as intense as the initial minutes of the dragon fight, to put it in perspective. This is helped a lot by the focus on explosive attacks. The Wither inevitably tears away at the environment around it, the battlefield evolving in a really interesting and unique way to change the course of action over time, as seen in the lack of light, almost leading to my death in the second half. The issue with this tighter encounter is just that, it was over in not much more than a minute. This is of course relative, I had quite good gear and plenty of time with the game, but to face another boss and for it to completely lack the anticipation and atmosphere of the dragon fight feels underwhelming and kinda lame. The Wither feels more like an excuse to drop a nether star than a completely holistic addition. I was happy to have done it, but it feels like a lackluster experience, not tapping into enough of what makes Minecraft great. And that's where you can see how content integration would change in Minecraft. The Wither released 10 years ago, and is the last proper boss to be added to the game, I believe. From here on, the devs seem to better understand the important role exploration and discovery played in the game. Making new additions interact with procedural generation made it more spontaneous, exciting, and diverse. The Wither lacks all of that. Granted, the lack of spontaneity is to its advantage to some extent, like the ability to choose where you fight, but largely proves to do it a disservice. This shift is one I'm glad was made, and likely proved more fulfilling for players as it made new content last longer as further updates were worked on. A great example of how new combat experiences would be implemented as the game kept expanding can be seen in the Ocean Monuments. Ocean Monuments were added in version 1.8, released in September of 2014. These monuments rest deep underwater, protected by a new enemy, Guardians. Infiltrating the monument and exploring it rewards you with sponge and 8 gold blocks. A series of room layouts are randomly generated, with some containing Elder Guardians, a stronger variant of the Guardian. It seems like a rather simple structure, but proves to be a larger affair, understanding how the underwater locale can provide unique gameplay opportunities. The biggest is managing your breathing. You can only hold your breath underwater for so long, and so you have to derive some solutions to this lest you meet a quick death. There are a multitude of ways to do this, whether through potions, enchantments, or exploits like using doors to create air pockets. Thanks to managing breathing, throughout the exploration of the monument there's an additional ever-present survival consideration, one you likely haven't had to take too much notice of up until now. This can really impact the flow of exploration. I was much more hurried as my potions of breathing were finite, compared to overworld exploration, which can be quite relaxed. One of the other major changes the monuments bring to light is that act of exploring. You can freely swim around, movement having much fewer restrictions. This greater freedom generally speeds up play, and I found myself getting turned around more as I wasn't forced to place little markers like blocks or torches just to get around. This then plays into combat. The Guardians will charge up and fire a beam at you when you're in their line of sight. They're rather simple but still have significant ramifications. With so much freedom of movement, swimming away and breaking line of sight becomes a reliable strategy, especially amongst a group of Guardians. This is encouraged by the smaller, segmented rooms and presence of pillars and small overhangs, giving many avenues to hide away in. This created, at least for me, a rhythm of popping in and out of rooms to take swings, where I was more pursuing combat than the enemies were. It feels uniquely appropriate for a structure like this while contributing to the feeling of progress and of overcoming something of your own volition and ability. That same freedom of movement could make combat redundant, but this has been sidestepped via the Elder Guardians, which will curse you with mining fatigue on top of the penalty to mining speed already placed upon the player while underwater. Seeing as the treasure of the monument, gold, must be mined, you're encouraged to seek out the Elder Guardians, likely coming across the smaller fellows along the way, naturally weaving combat into this part of the game. This all culminates in a hectic but at times sluggish mode of exploration, one that tests new dynamics of combat and efficiently recontextualizes player movement to feel utterly new in an already broad experience. The atmosphere backs up the gameplay assertions, creating a satisfying sense of build-up and payoff. The Guardians swimming around sounds like something constantly creeping up on you. The Elder Guardian's curse orally stabbing you as it goes by, foreshadowing the threat they pose. Taking out all 3 Elder Guardians to eliminate the mining fatigue status along with the monument's layout and structure give a good sense of segmented progress that feels like it's building up to something larger. Finally, the Guardian attack themselves build up before firing off, putting a tonal cap on the whole thing that leaves you interested but unnerved, something good or bad feeling like it could be around every corner. So you can see how the character of newly added content began to change. The Wither was abrupt, quickly over and done with at the player's discretion, but Ocean Monuments are seamlessly integrated, full of new opportunities that understand how a unique adventure can be brought out of the core of Minecraft's mechanics and gameplay. Monuments also breathed new life into oceans, helping set the stage for larger changes in the future, which would flesh them out and give them more purpose. I've already discussed how this was done with caves and the nether, but it would also go on to happen to the end. By throwing an ender pearl through one of these small portals that surround where you fought the ender dragon, you'll be transported to a cluster of the end's outer islands, with an end city typically sitting on the largest of them. Chorus trees line the ground, with the sharp verticality of their trunks and branches resembling the city itself. The island structure helps contribute to an individual sense of identity for the end as a realm, beyond what it already has. On the surface, the ability to manipulate the world is more used to chip away at it, to take from it what you can and replace it with what you want. In the nether, it's more about adding on, reinforcing it to make it safe and palatable. The end is about filling in the gaps, making it easier to get around, or even possible, by bridging these islands together. The new approach to terrain manipulation helps set the stage for how the experience will be flipped upside down, literally. End cities have really valuable loot, with the elytra, a pair of gliding wings, being chief amongst it. To retrieve it, you must scale the city and reach the end ship, though that simple explanation belies the troubles you will have completing the task. As I approached the base of the city, the stage was set brilliantly. Much like the nether, the end uses pieces of music from the overworld and reintroduces them under a new circumstance to communicate a new tone and atmosphere. As I neared my destination, the music began to deconstruct and morph into a warbly, pulsing, synth-led atmospheric song. While this transformation took place, parts of the overworld music would eke through, jutting in and out, fighting for space within the song but ultimately getting beat out by the growing strength of that lead synth. That's how the end city can feel. You're an outsider, a vessel from the surface, trying desperately to insert yourself into the end using ways you learnt from your home. Eventually, the two collide and meld to some extent, mirroring the player as they too learn that in order to overcome the end city, you must adapt to what makes it different and new. This is primarily thanks to shulkers. These are a unique mob that line the walls of the end city. They disguise themselves in their armoured shells before emerging to shoot homing projectiles which damage you and inflict the levitation status, while also having the ability to teleport away. They're diabolical little things, designed to specifically complicate navigating the end cities. The structure's vertical shafts can be ascended by jumping up a series of slabs, as shulkers fire at you from above. They can be taken down with arrows, but they're hard to spot when hidden away, and firing up at them and missing means that arrow is likely to come back down and hit you if you're not careful. Trying to be slow and methodical certainly helps, slowly eliminating them one by one, but once you get hit once or twice, things begin to spiral out of control. At first it seems like a blessing, an easy way to skip the platforming sections, but as you get higher, you realize many of the shulkers you thought you killed teleported to safety and are now grouped above you. Now you're constantly being peppered with levitation and damage. It's getting out of hand now, and you realize that eventually the levitation will go away and a very long fall is all that awaits you. The pellets come from every angle and are hard to block, stress mounting further and further. Encounters prove to be incredibly tense, the whole structure and layout of the city revealing to be a ploy to play into the behaviour of the shulkers. This presents the opportunity for unique combat and combat solutions, like using ender pearls to get back to the ground while floating further and further into the air. This was me having to, like I said earlier, adapt to the new way of this new realm. Along the way I was picking up lots of genuinely valuable loot, spurring me on further, helping keep the promise of the elytra front of mind. I eventually found myself across from the ship, pursued by shulker projectiles, ender pearls and totem of undying in hand, keeping my fingers crossed for a Hail Mary throw across to the end ship and momentary safety. I barely fucking made it, landing right on the ledge, quickly descending below deck and claiming the elytra. I equipped it, climbed to the top of the ship and took off, breathing a sigh of relief as I put those pesky shulkers behind me. The End City does a great job of carving out a firmer identity for the End while posing unique challenges and decisions that ultimately lead you to a legitimately interesting and fun piece of loot. It's not too drawn out but still manages to feel significant, drawing from and playing off of Minecraft's strengths through new details to prove itself as a worthwhile addition to the experience. Next I went from one alternate realm to another, this time wanting to tackle a bastion remnant in the nether. These are derelict castle-like structures which spawn in one of 4 variants, infested with piglins and rife with some valuable loot. I ended up finding what looked to be a half-formed bastardized version of one, as it was rather small and to me doesn't exactly correlate to any of those 4 variants. Like End Cities, bastion remnants understand what makes the nether so treacherous, littered with gaps and holes that take you into the lava below or halt any evading of enemies. The floor is dotted with gilded blackstone, which when mined will cause the typically passive piglins to turn hostile, baiting the player into their own demise. I found this out firsthand as things got dicey higher up. I was hounded by a couple of piglin brutes, eventually falling to my death. This was stupid. I should have known to have my totem of undying in my hand. so I was annoyed at myself. I had lost basically all my best gear and a decent amount of levels, with little chance of retrieving them. However, after stewing for a few minutes, it became a blessing in disguise. All the loot I'd gotten through these extracurricular expeditions was cool, but I was barely using any of it. In trying to encounter more of the game, I was losing sight of what I like to do in Minecraft, which was to create a simple, satisfying, pretty life. Something I had done long ago. You can see this most clearly with the Wither. It felt like an obligation, and I was never going to use the nether star to build a beacon. That's not who I am or how I play the game. I don't regret covering all the stuff I did after the dragon, but it mostly felt superfluous, and so this death was freeing, cathartic, and humbling. It made me feel comfortable to stop covering parts of the game that I felt obligated to because of this video. Minecraft then put that on full display, as when I respawned, empty-handed, I opened my inventory, and for the first time in tens of hours, I saw my character, properly, not obscured by armor or a shield, like I'd found myself again by purging the superficial. It was this invigorating, symbolic moment and visual that settled an odd sense of contentment in my chest. I climbed to the roof of my house and glided down to the base of the mountain, so I could climb those well-worn steps once more and get a final look at my home, before quitting to the menu. I was done with Minecraft. For now. While we're done with the game proper, I thought it would be interesting to take a more focused look at how it's evolved and changed, as the Minecraft of 2023 is not nearly the same as the Minecraft of 2011. Jumping between all this content post the dragon fight, it was interesting to see how it differed depending on when it was implemented. But if we zoom out even further, you can see some larger trends. Initially, updates seemed more focused on getting the game to 1.0, to a state that could be considered complete enough to warrant an official release. Beyond 1.0, updates followed a similar model, consisting more of an assortment of new features, whether mobs, blocks, biomes, or gameplay mechanics. This is where you can see things like the Wither were implemented, which are large additions but don't feel as holistically integrated as later additions. This model then started to shift, it seems, around 1.5, which was released in early 2013. Updates focused more on a specific theme, often bringing not just new content but more significant tweaks to old content, helping all the parts of the game feel relevant and contemporary. This approach was honed in on further and further, until you get to updates like 1.13, which is almost single-handedly focused on oceans and water biomes, enriching that experience. This slow shift in style of updating the game was a wise one, but does raise that issue of some old content feeling tacked on or redundant. These larger themed versions also exacerbate the knowledge problem. If you skipped 1.13 for example and jumped back in when 1.14 released, you'd feel completely lost in the oceans now. That would add to the exploration experience, but also leads to confusion, with no real in-game way to clear that up without extensive experimentation. So you can imagine what it would feel like if you skipped a bunch of updates and not just one. The evolution of Minecraft's updates didn't just allow for more focused implementation, but matched the changing model of Minecraft as a product. Minecraft's influence didn't just stem from gameplay mechanics like its crafting system or procedural generation, but how it was distributed. It was an early access game, before marketplaces like Steam had entire ecosystems to support those types of products. Minecraft began being sold while it was still in beta back in late 2010. Updates would roll in regularly, with development being supported by the purchase of the game. Developing and releasing this way became more and more common, specifically for games that were clearly taking heavy inspiration from Minecraft on the gameplay side. However, once Minecraft hit 1.0 and those aforementioned updates kept rolling in, the model began to shift. Minecraft has essentially become a live service now. The larger focus on a theme for each update mirrors this. It gives each one a significant central point to aggregate around, harboring more substantial changes that pull long-time players back in, essentially being a new season of the game, to use language from more traditional live services like Fortnite. A new update is a new set of headlines, an influx of traffic on Minecraft subreddits and from Minecraft YouTubers, and a way to get the game back in front of the eyes of the 8 people on Earth who are yet to buy it. Keep in mind this was a transition, there wasn't a sudden announcement that it was essentially a live service now. But live services aren't just about how content is distributed. They're primarily about manipulating you into spending so much money on them that you find yourself selling your neighbor Paul's annoying, yappy fucking dog on the black market so you can get some more skins. Minecraft is in an odd position in this regard. You can still play the game completely unrestricted and with access to all the newest content, off of one purchase, even one made a decade ago like in my case. I've never once interacted with any sort of storefront or virtual currency for the game, and I had a hard time finding one, which is because all of this is in the Windows or Bedrock version of the game, and I was playing in Java. So I decided to go over to that version and take a look. The marketplace consists of things like skins, emotes, texture packs, pre-built worlds, and these mashup packs. It's not too egregious and is mostly populated with user-generated content, so it doesn't feel as greedy, but all you're really paying for here is accessibility. Pretty much all of this stuff can be downloaded for free and added to the Java version, it's just that you'll have to navigate some folders to do it. But Minecraft historically has felt like a very pure experience. You just buy it and play it and customize it how you like with practically no restrictions outside of what your computer can run. And this marketplace bastardizes a lot of that magic for me. Not to mention the fact that this stuff is primarily aimed at children. The bright colors, abstraction through a secondary currency, and prominence on the main menu makes it feel inherently skeevy. And I'm not usually one who has this kind of take, but it makes me feel like kids who only play the Windows or Bedrock version are missing out a little. Exploring texture packs and mods all completely for free was incredibly fun when I was younger. It was another avenue through which I could express myself and exercise control and ownership. And for many players to not even know that's an option is a little sad, honestly. What underlines all this is Microsoft's buyout of Mojang and by extension Minecraft. The purchase happened in September of 2014 and people were rightfully skeptical. The freedom of control and customization, the level of access allowed into the game, seemed like something that was possible due to the lack of a corporate publisher, and so people were worried that would go away. Interestingly, that's only happened to an extent, as the Java version of Minecraft is still current and just as open as it's ever been, as far as I'm aware. However, I feel like that might change in the next 5 years or so. To go on a tangent and get a bit conspiratorial here, I guess, this seems to be a part of Microsoft's larger strategy. From my perspective, Microsoft recognized pretty quickly how the Xbox One was never going to surpass the PS4 and Sony's general global dominance when it came to console gaming. Once Phil Spencer took over as head of Xbox in March of 2014, their approach shifted. The Kinect TV-centric positioning of the Xbox One reeked of arrogance and a complete misunderstanding of what they were ultimately making, a game console. So, over time they completely reversed that stance. When talking, Phil Spencer constantly centers games, game developers, and people who play games, vowing to work to provide the best experience for all three. They were then able to manipulate their losing position into an underdog position thanks to this game-forward rhetoric and some key decisions. They championed things like backwards compatibility, crossplay, and a growing relationship with Nintendo, things that don't drive console sales or market share but look good to consumers. Microsoft understood that Sony, wanting to retain dominance, was going to be more reluctant around these initiatives. They wanted people solely on their platform. Microsoft had nothing to lose, and Sony nothing to gain through these avenues. Then there was Game Pass, which is undeniably an incredible deal. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. But that's part of the strategy. Xbox, over the course of 5 years or so, despite not really having any standout first-party games, was able to reposition itself in people's minds as a brand that cared about the act of gaming, of making it accessible but high quality. And in my opinion, that was all to lay the groundwork for the acquisitions happening now. There are people cheering on the buyout of Activision, active market consolidation into the hands of a single corporation, to go through just so Call of Duty games will be on Game Pass. Microsoft's repositioning of itself is working. And to finally bring it back around, Minecraft plays a role in this. Holding off on adding the marketplace for around 3 years, keeping support for ports of the game outside of Microsoft's ecosystem going, and continuing to update the Java version all feel like acts of goodwill that will dissolve once Microsoft practically owns the industry, when they have control of all the games you like and so hold the power of where and how you play them, and how much you pay to play them. I know this section feels a little long-winded, but in my opinion it plots Minecraft's interesting lifespan, starting as one of the biggest success stories of independent art ever seen, to now being a pawn in the larger strategy of Microsoft to monopolize a market and constrict consumer power in search of profit for some executives. God, capitalism is depressing. So, how about I conclude this thing by talking about how much I still love Minecraft as a game, so we can end on a better note. Where Minecraft excels the most is in its foundation. The absolute core of this foundation is the world generation. This simple decision lays down the commitment to player freedom and choice, making each world unique, like it's yours every single time. The procedural generation manages to create compelling environments in terms of aesthetics and how they implicate upon gameplay, fostering authentic flows of information and opportunity for the player. The characteristics of different biomes weave together interestingly to consistently create fresh landscapes, the act of exploration rarely getting boring. There are some quirks to how things generate, whether it be floating islands or seemingly misplaced blocks, but these phenomena are rare enough to instead feel like an aspect of world building, contributing to an oddly apocalyptic character in history. This of course extends across realms and down into the deepest depths, with the nether, the end, caves, oceans and ravines all staying true to what I've outlined above. These quirks aren't always positive, however. If you recall, the discordance between the stronghold and the end portal really soured that experience for me, and the possibility of that sort of thing happening inherently subtly lies dormant the entire time. The foundation is made stronger once the core mechanics and systems are built on top of this world generation. Survival is well considered, implemented on many different levels while making sure not to become too overbearing. Something like hunger, for example, feels attuned to be more important at the beginning of your journey when survival is most crucial. It soon becomes manageable, only cropping up in more extenuating circumstances like combat. This doesn't just help the player feel like they're growing and learning, but refocuses the playthrough, understanding that ever-present, nagging survival mechanics are exhausting to deal with. Survival mechanics as a whole tread this line brilliantly in Minecraft, managing to feel significant when they should, but easy to dismiss when not needed. I don't know another game that has quite nailed survival like Minecraft, and that also goes for building and crafting. This is in part thanks to how all these things keep in conversation with the sandbox and world generation. Building and crafting feel absolutely holistic, as each block is an opportunity for the player to express themselves, to exercise agency. Minecraft just gets what crafting should be in a game, refusing to fall victim to over-abstraction or automation of the process, giving tangibility and weight to your actions. No other game has a better crafting system than Minecraft, despite everyone trying for more than a fucking decade. There's of course a close relationship here with building. The player empowerment that comes from crafting stays true through to building thanks to an open-ended, liberating implementation that accommodates practicality and creativity, giving you room to totally invest in one or your very own mix of both. It's a way to leave an impression on the environment, to solidify some land as yours, to give yourself a home, somewhere comfortable in the ever-moving sandbox. Mining and combat then make great use of these two other systems, giving more traditional avenues through which the experience can be channeled through. They give context and some level of structure and guidance to the game, allowing players to find purchase and purpose amongst the expansive, sheer wall of the sandbox. Both manage to be simple on paper but complex and ever-changing in execution, a natural arc and narrative emerging as you delve deeper into the earth below you, or find yourself surrounded by more enemies. All of these core ideas have simple premises and mission statements that reveal immense complexity and possibility once the veil is lifted. These foundational ideas and systems are then dressed up and built upon by extra content like potions and enchanting, things that delve into the details, encourage you to explore mechanically and become further ingratiated into what you're making. Over time, more and more of these things have been added by way of bosses, structures, mechanics and items. These don't always stand the test of time as seen by the Wither, but all provide new opportunities and experiences for the player to make meaningful decisions within, broadening possibility to a practically endless degree. This is topped off by presentation, tone and atmosphere. The simple graphical style perfectly complements the game and what it's going for. It allows for easy to discern detail and comprehensive, breathtaking vistas and views. Then there's the music. I mean, what do you fucking say? Every track from the original OST is burned into tens of millions of players' brains, and in time newer songs from composers like Lena Raine and Kumi Tanioka will be too. The ability for this music to fill in the gaps of the moment so that it perfectly slots into becoming something meaningful and important is incredible. The grace with which it molds and toys with mood is unparalleled to me, because it's doing this almost improvisationally. Of course there's some underlying logic and algorithm to how and when and what music plays, but it never feels contrived or artificial. When music plays in Minecraft, it just makes sense and feels right. These things all combine and cooperate and communicate to create a one-of-a-kind experience, literally. As you look back, you'll realize that the world is now in your shape, carved out and molded by your hands to fit who you are. As I scrutinized the details, as you saw in this video, I saw myself reflected in them. From the ways I organized my storage chest to the relatively simple base they were contained within. I recognized some things I didn't like, yet they were self-evident and undeniable, but I was also affirmed and comforted on some level, as Minecraft made no judgments along the way. This is thanks to an unprecedented ability to accommodate the player and the endless well of respect that Minecraft has for your want to express or explore or create. Its themes are felt but never forced, an emergent player-driven narrative unfurling as you play to reinforce these themes. As such, it's an emotionally rich game, one with an undeniable, beating, blocky heart. And even after all these thousands of words, I've not come close to covering it comprehensively. There's so many mechanics and features that I bypassed or completely ignored, and likely some I'm still not even aware of, and even some more which are yet to exist. This is after not just analysing it for the past few months, but for playing it for over 10 years. I guess in saying that, my very positive impression of the game could seem coloured by nostalgia, but that's the thing. My memories aren't just from 10 years ago, they're also from 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 months ago, from times by myself, times with my brothers, times with my friends, times with strangers who'd become my friends and stay so some 8 years later. And that entire time, Minecraft grew with me. There's a lot I like and appreciate about the game now that I didn't when I was younger, that in some cases I couldn't due to it constantly evolving and being updated. To put it simply, there's nothing like Minecraft. In its story through development, its ubiquity, its influence, but most importantly, its qualities as a game. And though it's not perfect, and I fear for how it's being used as a part of corporate strategy that ultimately seeks to contradict itself and disempower the player, I still absolutely adore it as a piece of art. Minecraft is just something else.